And I am back. I'm very sorry for the delay and what happened. So I'm now going to join the StreamYard. Um, hello, hello, hello. Right. These first. Right. Oh my God.
All right,
There you go.
we got it.
Oh my
Welcome.
God. Hey there. Hey there. Very
All right.
sorry for the delay. I had some issues getting home, and then tech issues actually when trying to get onto this stream. So I do apologize.
That's fine.
Wouldn't have happened in fascism.
Okay.
Trains run on time in fascism, buddy.
All right.
Trains run on time.
So I'm gonna put you guys down. The intro is about 2 minutes, and then I will bring you guys on. Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem.
All right. All right. Jesus fucking Christ.
So, guys, we are backstage on Politically Provoked right now. Oh dear lord. I hear deafness. Okay, I'm just gonna mute that for a second. So essentially, we're finally gonna be debating the fascists. I like the disclaimer on this. It's like, the views and opinions expressed on Politically Provoked are those of the commentator and individual and do not reflect the position of Politically Provoked. I think that's an important disclaimer to have, isn't it, if you're going to have fascists on? My God. Please don't associate us with them. Yeah, it's the guy that argued that they were important immigrants. Which I think it's just a bit, like, outlandish way of going around things. Never heard that one before. They're importing the immigrants to win elections. It's like the most, like, I'm not going to lie, it's probably not doing them very well to win elections. What would it be, by the way? Like, no, it's starting now.
Good afternoon and welcome to Politically Provoked, your interactive podcast where we host debates, panels, and interviews. If this is your first time joining us, please like, share, subscribe, follow. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. All the information is in the banner below, or you can just search Politically Provoked and we should pop right up. Here on Politically Provoked, we try to represent both left and right-wing views on every episode. I'm your left-wing host, Brittany, and this is your right-wing host, Todd. So hi, Todd.
Hey, what's up, Britt? How you doing? You good?
I'm good. Got off to a rocky start, but we got this down. Okay.
We're going.
All right. So we have an exciting debate for you guys. The topic is fascism versus libertarian socialism. And we'll also be discussing veganism. The first person we have joining us is someone who is not new to Politically Provoked. He's the owner of liberalforum.org. If you haven't heard of it, go check it out. They are a site that really prides themselves on free speech. He also debates right-wing positions on behalf of Politically Provoked. We don't necessarily condone or agree with his positions, but feel it's necessary to have representation of the far right as well as the far left and everywhere in between. So with that being said, let's bring on the right winger y'all love to hate. Andrew, aka Big Papa Fascist. So, hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Hi. So, if you want to give a quick introduction, tell people a little bit about your politics for those who don't know you.
My name is Andrew Wilson. I own liberalforum.org. Politically, I would be what you would consider far, far right on the spectrum. And I argue for fun my positions on politically provoked.
Okay. So our next guest, Lewis, is coming to us all the way from the UK, hence the unusual time we are hosting this debate. He has a channel called Perspective Philosophy, and he discusses mostly philosophy and I think veganism, but I'll let him go into that a little bit more. So let's welcome Lewis to Politically Provoked. How are you tonight?
Hello, thank you for having us on.
Yes.
Yeah, so I am from the UK, specifically Newcastle, so that's northern England. I have a bachelor's and a master's in philosophy. I am now doing my PhD in philosophy, specifically on ethics and veganism. And I like a bit of political philosophy, so I do delve into the arguments, arguing against fascists and other people who would argue for what I would consider restrictions of freedom. And so, yeah, this is where I am, and it's what I do.
Okay. All right. So what we will do is each person can give an opening statement, can be as little as 1 minute, but no longer than 5 about the topics. We're doing 2 today. And what your stance is. After that, we'll open up the floor. After the debate is over, we might go into a small Q&A portion, but I'm not sure how you're on time because I know you said you had to be out of there by 9 your time. So we'll just kind of play that by ear a bit. So I'm going to pull up the rules just so we're all on the same page. So no racism, homophobia directed at guests or audience. This does not include someone discussing these views or expressing their personal views. No cutting off people as they're speaking. No talking over. No personal attacks, attacking people's personal appearance. Limit the filibuster. Everyone should have an equal amount of time. And no doxing of guests or audience. And all this goes for the people watching as well. So any violations will result in a 30-second mute. Every additional violation will result in an additional 30 seconds. But hopefully we won't need to do that. Let's attack the argument, not the person. And with that being said, let's get into opening statements. I think we'll start with veganism. So if you want to get us started, Lewis, with that.
All right, you want to start with veganism? Yeah, absolutely. So I would argue that the consumption of animal products is unethical. I think that in today's society, our number one interaction with animals is actually at 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I don't think that we actually understand that animals are sentient creatures who are deserving of moral consideration. And I would ground this in the fact that they suffer, that they feel pain and pleasure like you and me, and that this is what is morally considerable. That any other claim, let's say like intelligence or social capabilities language, are ad hocing moral value, assuming moral value and asserting it, which would leave them suspect to Hume's guillotine. So I would say that in terms of what we need to do in society is to destroy the animal agricultural industry, but in so liberate what is an oppressive and unjustified authority that we have over 70 billion animals. 70 billion animals are killed every year. This is just land animals. Are killed every year for human consumption unnecessarily. People can live happily and healthily on a vegan diet, and most people think that it's necessary to consume animal products when it's just simply not. So there's the ethical side in terms of animal exploitation, and then there's also the aspects of how it harms humans. I mean, everyone can understand that animals are harmed in the exploitation of the billions of farm animals that are killed in factory farms around the world, but most people don't realize that actually it's harming humans massively as well. So zoonotic diseases, for example, like the coronavirus, but many other diseases, so like HIV, H1N1, polio, pretty much every form of influenza has come from animals. And all of these are avoidable because the only reason that we are getting these diseases is because we are in close proximity to animals, and which are being kept in incredibly large numbers. Animal agriculture is the number one cause of antibiotic resistance because they are being fed the same antibiotics that we then take ourselves to free ourselves from infections. And we consume them on a day-to-day basis by consuming these animals. Then there's the societal and individual effects it has upon like ordinary workers, for example. Slaughterhouse workers can develop what's called PITS disorder. That's perpetration-induced traumatic stress, which is a form of PTSD, which is severely crippling to the individual. Symptoms such as alcohol abuse, drug abuse, psychological doubling, disassociation, insomnia, feelings of disintegration, similar to what veterans face after they come out of warfare, especially in conflicts from which they do not see as a defensive war. And after the way that we've trained the military, the changes that we've done to the way we've trained the military. So in terms of the psychological damage of these industries, it's irreparable. Also, these industries prevent unionization a lot of the time, actively try to subvert worker rights, and place workers into a very hazardous and dangerous situation, both for zoonotic diseases and for lacerations, wielding very sharp blades. And then this has a negative impact not only on their psychology, but on their engagement in the community. We see that the size of a slaughterhouse facility in relation to the local population is directly correlated with arrest and report rates for violent crime. So we can genuinely correlate, genuinely show that there is a strong correlation between a meatpacking facility and the size and how many workers are employed and the reports of domestic violence especially. All of these are issues of animal agriculture, and that isn't even touching the environmental aspects, which is the deforestation, number one cause of deforestation, the number two cause of global warming and climate change. And I think even in the US alone, there is 35,000 miles of river polluted because of animal agriculture. There isn't one good thing about it, and I don't see any reason to perpetuate an industry which is really just being used to profit the few rather than serve the many.
All right, Andrew, thank you.
So, listen to how insane this is. This guy's advocating that slaughterhouse workers are getting wartime style PTSD and then going home and beating their wives, right? There's a correlation between them and working in the slaughterhouse, and it causes them so much internal strife that they just have to go home and be abusive towards their spouse. That's nonsense. The reason he says it's correlation, there's no proof for any of that. It's complete and total nonsense. Here's the truth. The truth is human beings are apex predators. We're at the top of the food chain. We're excellent and we're awesome at killing things, and men tend to enjoy killing things all the time. We do it constantly. I would ask my opponent, one, if insects fall under the category of animals to him. Should we stop killing insects also? Or is it just mammals? Is it just the cute furry ones that you want to stop killing?
If we can avoid killing anything, I'd say we should avoid killing it, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So would that include mosquitoes, the number one cause of death in most African nations? Should we avoid killing them?
Well, it's the rule of double effect, so killing them is to save a life. So no, I think we're justified in killing mosquitoes.
I think feeding my family saves their lives. And I think that while you can make a good case that a massive factory farming is unethical, and most people aren't for that, that you can locally use local source farms where animals are grown domestically and are cared for with long lives. And yeah, I don't see any problem with consuming them at all. I don't see any problem with consuming their byproducts at all. Also, what are you going to do with all of these billions of animals that are domesticated? They can't live in the wild by themselves, man. You can't what are you going to do? You're going to take 180 million chickens and just let them go?
Well, I think it's actually closer to I think it's like 20 billion chickens.
Yeah, whatever it is. I don't care how many it is. You're just going to let them go?
Well, I think the reality is that the world's not going to go vegan overnight, and will slowly reduce demand, and so supply will slowly drop as well. So the chickens that exist now aren't the chickens that I'm trying to, save. I'm actually trying to prevent many future generations of chicken being born. And that's the real goal of veganism.
But many future generations of chickens are most assuredly going to be born if we continue to bore them to eat them, sir.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
We shouldn't. Mass farming has produced the most domestic animal life probably ever on planet Earth.
And that is destroying.
So there's more life. There's more mammalian life right now probably than ever.
Yeah, but it's destroying our own habitat. It's the most irrational way. You call us apex predators, clearly not rational ones if we take that logic.
What do you mean?
Like, we're destroying what is the habitat of humanity by perpetuating.
You would destroy it by trying to feed everybody broccoli too, man.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, it's.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
Oxford
you would.
estimated.
We gotta stop interrupting.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm sorry, you have the floor.
Thank you. Oxford estimated, I think it was Oxford. I have to double check the study. It was 70% less land use if we swapped to a plant-based diet, and 28% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. For example, we wouldn't need to use, like, think about it like this: it's the trophic pyramid. It's quite basic. The higher up you go on the trophic pyramid, the more energy is wasted in what you consume. So if you're an apex predator, you're on the top of the food chain and you're consuming animals, which are consuming plants, the higher up you go, the more wasted energy there is. And so the bottom of the pyramid actually gets larger. The higher, like the less, like one hawk, for example, consumes...
What animals am I consuming that are consuming animals?
Well, like most people would consume something like tuna, for example. But I guess the most animals that are consuming just plants, it's still wasted energy. It's just the higher up you go on the trophic pyramid, the worse it gets. You called yourself an apex predator. Typically, apex predators, are higher and higher. But really, you're actually a second.
And we're at the highest. We're at the highest rung of that. There are no natural predators for human beings, sir. None.
Well, they are. They're actually human beings, and they typically take the the guise of fascists.
Andrew, we've got to let him respond.
So he's got to let me respond too. You can't be a natural predator to your own species, man. That's not how that works.
It wasn't, and I wasn't making a serious remark when I said that. Like,
okay, so do you agree we're apex predators then?
I don't think we're predators. I don't think that. I think we're outside of the atypical food chain, and we've been outside of the atypical food chain ever since the invention of farming, really.
What do you mean? So you're saying that our predatory nature went away because we learned how to farm?
Well, one, I think you're making claims about human nature that can't be instantiated, that we're predatory. I don't think that...
We've killed everything we've seen or domesticated it or conquered it for 10,000 years.
Yeah, so you can say that history has shown...
possibly say that
I don't think, like, so for example, another thing, like take, for example, like the other human behaviors that have been, like, done. Humans used to live in the woods. Humans used to live, in many different ways. They don't live that way now. Like, humans are capable of intellectual evolution as well as physiological advancements in terms of technology. So, like,
are you saying that we've intellectually evolved in 10,000 years to get past our apex predatory positioning?
I'm saying that we've evolved in 10,000 years ethically to understand our place.
That's not evolution. You're just saying that societies evolved that way.
Yeah, I said sociologically, didn't I?
Okay, gotcha. Well, I must have missed that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that in terms of ideology, what makes us who we are, it's not determined by our birth. It's determined by our culture and by the way in which we think and engage in reality, the concepts we use. Unless you wanted to instantiate a level of human, like a foundational human nature.
So tell me something, just out of curiosity. What are the food groups that rot your teeth, and what are the food groups that don't?
The food groups that rot your teeth. Well, typically refined carbohydrates.
Yeah. So does meat rot your teeth?
No, but...
No. Well, so the reason I make this point is...
You think that's evidence?
Well, because vegans, there's lots of evidence for the weakness in their bone density.
No, there isn't.
And this happens over a long period of time eating a vegan diet. Meat eaters don't have that problem. There's study after study proving that this is so. That aside,
no, there isn't.
That aside, you would not be naturally attracted to foods that were bad for you, that were terrible for you. We're attracted to sugary, salty foods. That's what we're attracted to, and that's what we thrive on.
Sugary, salty foods. But you just said that sugary foods. You just actually contradicted yourself there.
Fruits are sugary foods.
So we're attracted to fruit. Oh, we're attracted to, well, kind of. I'm actually like the worst person fighting a terrible diet, so.
Okay, well, right. But I'm just saying, yes, we're attracted to fruit. Okay?
Yeah.
We're attracted to meats. When you smell meat cooking, you want to eat it. Okay,
I mean, like, if you look at it, like most natural animals don't have to cook meat to eat it. Like, the fact that we have to cook meat to eat it.
We don't have to cook meat to eat it.
Well, we kind of do to avoid parasitic infection.
Yeah, that's right. We only cook it to keep down on the disease, but you can eat raw meat. People eat almost raw steak
die
all
young.
the time, constantly.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't hurt them a bit.
Well, it does actually. And if you look at, like, for example,
It doesn't.
if you look at the number one causes of death in humanity, and I think this is the better way to look at it. I mean, look. If we take the anthropological evidence, the evidence to say that we're, descendant from carnivorous animals is like nonsense. Omnivorous animals, perhaps, but even then, the majority of, let's say, an ape's diet was like 99%. Plant-based products, so like frugivores, and that's our closest ancestors, like bonobos, or closest relatives today, like bonobos, and other fructivorous animals have teeth quite similar to ours, eat bananas most of the time.
It's so ridiculous to even say that, man.
How is that ridiculous?
That is most of
general
our
scientific
ancestors
consensus.
who were in northern environments did not have ready access to fruits and plant life.
I completely agree, but I mean, look, it depends on how far back on the evolutionary chain you go. So, like, if we look at, like, when I talk about, for example, our ancestors in terms of, like, before Homo erectus, then we're going back to the point in which we are, primates. That's like about 250,000 years ago.
Who cares about primates? We're talking about vegans.
What is happening, Andrew? Andrew, don't make me mute you, please.
Because you made points that are anthropologically unsound. So I'm trying to go through human evolution and explain it to you, and explain that human evolution didn't depend upon, let's say, the consumption of meat, and it was probably more of a scarcity issue. As you say, people in northern continents did not have access to let's say fruits and vegetables, but then that's actually pulled into question. So even the fossilized feces of prehistoric man shows 100 grams of fiber in it. Where do you think fiber comes from? Does it come from animal products? No, it comes from plant products. So what we're seeing now is that not only did prehistoric man have to have the capabilities and intelligence to trap and cook animals in the first place, which was takes a level of intellect which would already evolved, but they also were consuming what we believe to be tubers and starchy root vegetables as well, which totally ties into the medical evidence of why the majority of our populations are dying from diseases related to the consumption of animal products, inflating cholesterol levels, causing calcification of plaque in our arteries and leading atherosclerosis, dementia, heart disease, and even erectile dysfunction.
Those are problems that are much more concentrated around a vegan diet than a person with a well-balanced meat diet.
Oh, no, they're not. Actually, I mean, if that was the case...
Fertility greatly decreases with veganism.
But it doesn't. Actually, if you look, vegans have higher free testosterone levels.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I can send you the study.
Prove it. That's false.
Okay.
It's false. Totally false. Completely and totally false. Google it. Go ahead. Show me the fertility differences between meat eaters and vegetarians. I don't believe you. I believe that that's a complete and total falsehood. On top of all of that, you can say anthropological evidence showed this in this caveman's diet. It's not proof for what they ate. You can't prove what Homo erectus ate concisely.
Well, I mean, it actually is. I mean, it actually is proof. If we
only produce fossilized evidence showing this, maybe perhaps theoretically, is what their diet was. What we know is we have 10,000 years. We have 10,000 years of recorded history. We have been eating meat since mankind has penned on paper.
Okay, so we've got 10,000 years of recorded history, and we've been eating meat, and that for you is enough to determine that we are naturally meat eaters, and not in the last 10,000 years. That is a sociological phenomenon.
We went from tens of thousands to millions to billions of people. And we're all a bunch of carnivorous bastards. We seem to be thriving.
Well, actually, I mean, if you look, even in recent times, it wasn't until like the average individual didn't have access to meat in the levels in which we do today. It was factory farming and Bernard Matthews, that kind of era, which allowed for that. And mostly people eat like the byproducts of the meat, dairy, and egg industry. And this factory farming that we see today is a technological.
I don't like factory farming. But
I know what you proposed is something which is
locally sourced hamburger meat. I don't know what you're going to do with these billions of critters that you're going to release out into the wild.
Critters. I'm not releasing anything.
We're not going to do that. You're going to gradually keep eating them until people get smart enough that they're going to go to a plant-based diet, essentially. That's what your position is, right?
Yeah. That people need to educate themselves on the benefits of a plant-based diet.
Right. So I'm trying to keep up, man. I'm sorry.
I know it's difficult. I know.
It is difficult.
So, if I may, I'll explain.
So what?
So wait a minute. If I may, I'll I'll just
All right,
explain.
you guys. Okay, we gotta stop.
My turn.
Okay,
All
well,
Well,
praising
how is
man.
it your
All
turn? I think you just had to.
yeah. Okay, so let's just let's all just take a deep breath real quick. So, all right. So yeah, let Lewis go really fast, and then you can have your time because we need to have a little bit more back and forth. We're doing a lot. Both of you actually are getting to the point where we're both interrupting a bit. So
Yeah, that's
let's go to Lewis, and then we'll have you go, Andrew.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that one, I don't plan on releasing billions of animals into the wild. I don't think that the world's going to go, vegan overnight. I think that's nonsense, and I think that's like one of the worst arguments against veganism. I think the funny thing is it's also an argument which tries to say that, well, what about environmental catastrophe when the environmental catastrophe is actually being perpetuated by having these animals in the first place? As I said, number one cause of deforestation, ocean dead zones, global warming, and then if you look at the let's say the medical data in relation to these diseases, we can show that it's not like anything but common scientific consensus to say that meat, dairy, and egg products, for example, elevate cholesterol levels, and elevated cholesterol levels relate to heart disease and death. And these are the number one. I mean, dementia is the number one cause in the UK, and I think heart disease is the number one cause in the United States. And these are directly correlated. Directly.
Heart disease is caused, and this type of thing is caused by complex carbs. Complex carbs.
Can't believe that.
What makes you want cookies really bad is that you have butter, sugar, and wheat all put together. Those are the things that cause. You can't fill up to death on steak, man. There's no meatitarians out there who are just rampantly dying from heart disease.
Do you know
now the studies? You should read some. There's good literature on this. Okay, Rob Wolf with the Paleolithic diet. Okay, he studied this in depth. Lots of people have studied this in depth, including Atkins studied this in depth. There's a lot of scientific literature on this. Not only that, you could right now Google "is an egg good for you?" and you would get 300 different responses. There's no consensus on that. Okay, there's never been good consensus on dietary biology because it's too complicated. Okay, what's good for you in your diet is not necessarily going to be what's good for me in my diet. And saying that a vegan diet is good for everybody is insane. Well, and by the way, while we're on the topic of this, what are you going to do with all the service animals? People rely heavily on service animals, correct?
Which ones do you mean? Do you mean like guide dogs for the blind?
Let's see, carrier pigeons, which are still used fairly consistently in many parts of the world.
Who is using carrier pigeons in 21st
They're still
century?
used in warfare to this day, sir.
I'm sorry. I like to think that I really, truly, I mean, if it was necessary, fair enough. But even then, it wouldn't be using them as a means to an end.
Not
Because you could
done
have,
yet. You're talking about service dogs being a primary, of course.
Yeah, that's more likely, though.
You're talking about service. You're talking about cats that are used in a domestic process to keep down vermin from all types of different food, including grain, which would be poisoned if you allow too much vermin to get around it. What do you do with all of those critters? Are they all sentient beings? And what we can't have them as pets anymore either.
Well, I think it's about the minimization of suffering. That's the thing that you need to consider as well. So if you did have to take a life in order to preserve one's own life, that would be an act of self-defense. And I think that falls under the understanding of even the Christian doctrine that exists in the United States today would take that position. It's not that for example, if someone attacks you, that they have less moral value. It's that when they attack you, they have done that. When you defend yourself, it is a rule of double effect. You aren't trying to harm them. You're trying to protect yourself against the harm that they are trying to do to you.
Tell me how it's unethical to raise cattle free-grazed.
Okay, so one, you end their life prematurely. Two, the way that, so for example, the average cow lives to the age of.
To begin with, if you weren't raising them to eat them.
Yeah, but it's a means to an end. It's like it would be okay to raise a slave.
But they're not suffering.
Well, they are suffering. Actually,
well, I don't consider animal life equal to human life.
Well, yeah, but let's answer one question at a time.
It's not like raising a slave.
We're doing it again, you guys. Okay.
Can I answer one?
You ask him a question, let him answer, and let's have some back.
He did answer. They are born.
I didn't answer. I didn't finish.
They are born specifically.
No, I think that
specifically.
Look, I agree.
Birthed on farms.
I do not disagree. I do not disagree that they are born specifically to be consumed. My point was that it doesn't justify their birth and their exploitation. So when a being is born, let's say someone births someone into slavery. A father decides, I want 5 kids, to lock in my basement and sexually assault. that just because they wouldn't have been born if he didn't, make that conscious decision to exploit them, doesn't justify the exploitation, because there is a value to that individual separate from his means ends relationship. And this is where the old maxim is treat an individual as an end in themselves and not a means to an end.
Okay, I'm trying to get clear of the moral equation that you just put forward, saying that somebody who birthed children to sexually assault them is the equivalent of you raising a cow to eat it.
No, I never
That's
said the word
absurd
equivalent
on its face, and it doesn't follow any Christian doctrine at all.
I didn't say the word equivalent.
Okay, when we're talking about ethically raising an animal, the animal wouldn't exist first and foremost without us raising it for the purpose of consumption. You raise it for a couple of years, you can humanely kill it where it feels absolutely no pain, and then you can consume it, and the circle of life continues. This is a natural phenomenon in nature. So this happens constantly.
If I may, I would say that humane slaughter is an oxymoron. You want humanely killing someone if they didn't need to die. So, for example, if I kill someone in their sleep, I'm not humanely killing them. I may be painlessly killing them. It doesn't make it right. Humane implies benevolence and care and compassion, whilst slaughter unnecessarily is what we would classify as murder, or at least unjustified killing, and is considered wrong and unjust. So it's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense.
That's all semantics. Look,
it's not semantics. It's ethics, actually.
Would you allow a person who had stage 4 cancer and was suffering to be put down?
If they chose to die, then yes.
Gotcha. Okay. But on the other hand, you don't want me to raise a cow ethically and kill it quickly where it feels no pain for the purposes of consuming it.
I think comparing a stage 4 cancer patient and a cow on a farm is somewhat of a dubious comparison.
I don't think it's any more dubious than comparing sexual predators with.
I never said that. I never said. One, you said that I equated them. I did not. I never said they were doing as wrong. I said that they were committing the same logical engagement with the other, quote unquote, with other individuals. They are using a being as a means to an end, and I made that specific.
Just so you know, that's called a comparison.
That's a comparison, but not an equivalence, and there's a difference.
So, you guys, we're probably going to want to start to wind this topic down and move on to the main topic. So I don't know if you guys have any last arguments you want to make on this before we move on to. I wasn't expecting the veganism to go that way. So
I'll let you close, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice of me.
As always. Now, I would say that it's unbelievably clear that there isn't a single good justified argument for the consumption of meat, dairy, and eggs. Not only does it lead to slow, agonizing death on the parts of humans, as seen in evidenced by our cultures, all dying. And my opponent here proposed that veganism as an alternative leads to negative health outcomes. Yet the health outcomes we've seen in vegan populations, the Adventist vegans, for example, are one of the longest living populations in the world. And their bone density is doing absolutely great with absolutely low cholesterol levels and on suffering from the same conditions that the general population are suffering from today who consume meat, dairy, and eggs. And funnily enough, dairy is tied to lower bone density. And we'll see fracture rates in Holland, for example, consuming more dairy as being higher and so on. But, it is a dubious, as it is a dubious claim to say that dairy causes lower bone density. I think that would be, pushing the boundary. But what we can say is that meat, dairy, and eggs do cause heart disease. Now, in terms of the environmental impact, no one's releasing 70 billion animals into the wild. We just wanted to drop consumption so that they are no longer birthed. If they're no longer birthed, they're no longer exploited. I do not believe that we are justified in birthing others to use them. When we engage with other individuals, they are not a means to an end, but an end in themselves, and they deserve treatment with equal consideration to live a good life, a life that is free from unnecessary suffering, and should be treated as and shouldn't be ended prematurely for the interests of greedy and self-orientated individuals who could have done otherwise. The only people who benefit from this industry are those who own this industry. It's big agriculture. even small farmers want out of this game a lot of the time because it's difficult. It's not actually paying them very well. Most of the profits are coming from subsidies. Let's give the average farmer a better job. Let's give the slaughterhouse worker a better job, and let's make society better by not treating animals as a means to an end and by freeing ourselves from our number one killers and existential crises. So yeah, thank you very much.
So in closing on that subject, I'll just say all you had to do was listen to the insanity that came out of my opponent to understand how ridiculous this argument is. There's not widespread problems with slaughterhouse factory workers going home and punishing their wives because of their slaughterhouse PTSD. That's one. Two, he compared a person who wants to ethically raise and kill an animal that wouldn't even exist if that person hadn't decided to raise it in the first place, to sexual predators. I mean, this kind of stuff is insane. We are predatory by nature. That's what men are, okay? And we always are going to be this way. We're not unhealthy because we eat meat. Am I saying that that nothing should ever be done in moderation? Of course, you can moderate some of the consumption habits that you have, so that you don't kill yourself by the fork. I'm a big proponent of that. But taking away meat's insane. There's no farmers who are rushing to try to run out and get other jobs right now. Not at all. Especially not locally sourced beef, locally sourced pork, not locally sourced animals of any kind. Farmers seem to be quite happy with where they're at. They seem to be quite happy to produce these things. I'm quite happy to have chickens in my backyard right now and consume their eggs. They seem to be quite happy to eat the bugs that are in my backyard for me. It's quite a good mutual relationship. So no, this is all insanity. Don't do it. He hasn't made a great case for it at all, and he's never going to be able to. All the science that he can show you, you can look up competing science almost right away, including our own food groups, which have changed so many times, it's ridiculous.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to our next topic, fascism versus libertarian socialism. I don't know if you want to get us started on an opening statement with that.
Yeah, so just to qualify, I had heard a previous debate that you had with, I think he was a neo-Nazi, who was a fascist.
Oh, yeah, I debated. Well, he wasn't a neo-Nazi. The thing is, funnily enough, there was a neo-Nazi and there was a fascist that I debated before in the same debate. I think it's hilarious because, like in terms of fascism and neo-Nazis, the
Let's
Eastern European...
let Andrew finish his opening statement, then we'll get back into
it. I'll just explain it.
I asked.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason that I asked is because I still don't quite understand this concept of libertarian socialism. But let me just tell you where I'm coming from my perspective, because It seems to me that you're trying to argue for more individual freedom, that being the most important position that you take.
The greatest expression of subjectivity, yeah.
Is that pretty much correct?
Yeah, more freedom.
And you don't like fascism because it's going to limit the freedom.
Yeah, authoritarian governments overstep boundaries.
Gotcha. So this is my opening for this. I want to know what a fascist government is going to do that is worse than the democratic governments we have right now. I'd like to ask you if they're going to lock me up in my house for months at a time under the guise of the good of the public. I'm going to ask you if the fascist government will require me to wear a mask at certain times to go out in public. If I get caught not wearing the state-approved mask, will I go to jail? Will I be fined? Will I be imprisoned under the fascist government? Will I have my business shut down maybe by the fascist government? Will they direct technocrat billionaires to censor large swaths of public opinions? Will they limit my movement? Will they pick which businesses stay open and which ones close? Will they have secret courts in the interest of the state where they can obtain secret warrants to spy on their citizens? Will they allow a couple of percentage of the Earth's population to always win the market game? Will they allow central banking to exist and cause an infinite debt inflation cycle? Will they censor certain news outlets and publications that disagree with official narratives? Will they censor high-profile opposition leadership and deplatform and deperson them for the good of the state?
Yeah.
Will they put pressure on private industry to ban books they don't like? Will they allow certain politicians to be above the law? Will they selectively prosecute people who engage in violent activities and the destruction of public
Absolutely.
property? Will they pull down landmarks and private property? Will they institute a social credit score and make it so you can't buy or trade or even visit relatives?
Yeah, that's
If the
China.
credit
That's
score
China
isn't
right
high
now.
enough, will they make it so I can never truly own my own land? Will they send me to re-education training that tells me how bad my skin color is if I decline to take away,
Absolutely.
or if I decline, take away my means of making a living? Will they blacklist me if I don't have the right opinions? Will they take away my guns? Will they limit my speech? Will they selectively interpret amendments to fill their agendas? Will they import their own voting block in order to maintain power?
100%.
This, by the way, this list goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
and I wrote it
all
up
of
in just
those.
a couple of hours.
Like,
The reason that this list goes
like,
on and on and on, this is all democratic governments doing this. Some of them socialist in nature.
Okay, well,
So
wait a minute. The
fascism.
social credit scheme,
Tell me
was that
all
not
about
China?
how fascism, social credit score is already being looked at as being implemented.
That's
And by the way,
in China right
we
now,
have a
which is a
that's
fascist
right,
government.
It's true, communist, which is on the roadmap of socialism.
Oh, no,
And
no,
by
no.
the way,
No, they're not.
Yes, it is.
No, they're
Your
not.
libertarian ideology for socialism is combined with Marxism. Marxism's
Well,
right
actually, I would consider myself pre-Marxist socialist as a Hegelian socialist. So the guy that and he was conservative in origin. So like no, don't conflate.
look, it's in the definition of the criteria of being a libertarian socialist. But to finish my opening here, what I'm saying is I'm trying to draw this contrast of all the boogeymen that my opponent's going to say the fascist government's going to bring in are all the boogeymen that are right here under democratic governments. Right now, right this second, under democracy, these are the things that we're dealing with. Now, he might say that China is the one who implemented the social credit score, but there's social credit scores right here in the United States. And if you don't have right think, you're deplatformed. That's a social credit score. Whether or not the state's enforcing it, it's still a social credit score. And the state will eventually begin to enforce it. These Orwellian measures continue, and these all continue under democratic governments. And I'd like to know why my opponent thinks that fascist governments are going to limit his freedom, but not democratic ones when they clearly already are.
Well, I would say that democratic governments, at least we can pull into question. You know, every few years there is maybe a spectacle of a vote from which we don't gain that much political power because it's corporatized and, essentially, first past the post. I would agree that we need to, take that down. But then I would advocate for more democracy. So I would say like this democracy is being subverted by an authoritarian government, which is taking the power to hold them to legislation away. And now I completely agree. Those democratic governments that do those awful things are wrong and should be, taken out of power and replaced with a democratic, responsible government that can be held to account by the people, that is for the people, by the people. And I think that is fundamentally the basis of the United States, is it not? A government that represents the
interest. It used to be part of the debate. It's not anymore.
Right. So when we look at like how we, and even in the UK, right, like liberalism in the first place originated from people like John Locke, who were trying to hold the government to account. Like the irony of this all is that libertarians can look back and see a liberal ancestor in John Locke fighting the government, and those like, Adam Smith and, those individuals who perpetuated individual freedom are on the same side, and the opposition are the monarchists, or the authoritarian rulers, or those individuals who believe that you are too stupid to think for yourself and rule yourself and dictate what you can do in a free economy. Now, that I think is the way that we should, move towards, having, big government dictate and tell us what to do. The nanny state. That is all fascism is the nanny state steps in at every step of the way to dictate what we can do in our lives under the guise that they are giving us order, when all they are giving us is the desires of the leaders. Look at China, for example, right? You call China communists. Maybe they are. Maybe China are far left. But if we, take the horseshoe analogy,
they're mixed. They're a mix. They're not one pure thing.
Okay, but we can take the horseshoe analogy. But they are certainly more authoritarian than libertarian. And I think that is a massive distinction between a form of socialist or even a form of capitalist who is libertarian and who is authoritarian. I would not compare a fascist to an ANCAP. I certainly don't think that badly of anarcho-capitalists. I do disagree with the capitalism, but I do appreciate the fact that they don't want governments ruling and dictating every action we can and cannot make. And I think fundamentally the United States is built on that. Look, the whole reason you have guns in the first place is to ensure democracy. And here you are trying to subvert it.
No, the democracy is actually the fact that democracy is even there is what allows it to be subverted by a simple will of a majority. And the more pure the democracy becomes, the more easy it is to be subverted. For instance, with your example with guns, democratically, they can be taken away from me. In this democracy we now have, they can be taken away with me. From me. The United States was set up as a representative republic, not as a democracy. Only certain people within the republic were ever allowed to vote. Ever. That has changed over time into a more and more and more pure democracy, and it has become, due to that democracy, it's becoming more and more and more totalitarian. That's what it's doing. Democracy is being subverted the more pure it becomes. This is because the wills of simple majorities can swing behavioral patterns inside of human beings at a local level. And this causes massive problems when you throw diversity in there, especially.
Why would diversity cause problems in this?
Man, okay. You have a democracy. If you want a pure democracy, you got 51% of the people who rule 49% of the people. Yes?
Yeah, but...
Okay. So if you have a diverse group of people, they're always going to fight to get to the 51% marker so that they can rule the other 49%. And that is what you find in localized politics in the United States, where democratic rule is almost pure. Diverse groups begin to enter into political warfare with each other in order to struggle for power using the democratic process.
Yeah, but look at it like this. You said they need 51%. So the more diversity there is, the more power checks there is. So the less likely they are to achieve a higher overall majority. So diversity is exactly what you should want. That's because it would subvert the likelihood.
Andrew, he let him finish his point. Go ahead.
So it would subvert the chances of getting a majority. So you're saying that diversity is the problem when diversity would actually prevent gaining an overall majority in populism.
No, it doesn't.
And then look, your guns aren't going to be taken by democracy. Guns are taken by a monopoly of violence. So if we agree that the state is the monopoly of violence and the state can dictate of whether a gun is taken or not, then whoever controls the state controls whether people have guns or not. Now, the whole point of having guns in the first place was the power check of the people to the state. Now, guns aren't the best way of doing it, if I'm honest. I think that the reality is the power check of guns to the state it's not the best way of doing it in a contemporary civilized society. I think we need power checks at much more local levels. We need decentralized government so that we can power check on a local level and make sure that we aren't being essentially subverted by power structures. But even if you say look, the overall majority of Americans want to get rid of guns. So let's say 70% of Americans have deemed it that their state should not be armed. Why shouldn't Americans have control over their state? Why shouldn't Americans make decisions for themselves in terms of the rule of the average everyday individual? And instead, why should one or two or three or a group of individuals make those decisions for them? You're asking for a parent, not a government.
I'm sorry, was that a question or a statement?
It was a question. In the sense of why you are wanting a nanny state rather than a state from which you can dictate and control.
As I just explained to you, democracy is so easily subverted
into something like fascism, though. So
you have to start looking at the hierarchical structure.
So
I just let you go on for a while.
That's fair. Finish your point. Sorry.
So again, within the confines of democracy, the subversion that ends up happening, people tend to look outside of that at hierarchies at that point. They look towards monarchies. They look for people who are strong men to be in charge of these types of societies. That's a natural part of the hierarchical order of humanity. What happens with pure democracy, which is why I hate it so much, is that local populations can be displaced by 1 or 2% and their entire will culture, everything can be completely eradicated from them quickly. And there's nothing they can do about it. That's the opposite of what libertarians want. Libertarians are big on individual property ownership and the non-aggression principle. Yeah.
It depends on the libertarian, but yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty key to the libertarian statement. Okay, what ends up happening here, though, in the United States is that local demographics shift. And when they do, if you can shift them past a certain point, you can control the entire electorate locally. So what I'm advocating for instead is something more of an autocratic system where we look to the natural hierarchy within our societies for leadership like we naturally do.
Well, so one, I would say that there's been no proven human nature. And so when you say the natural hierarchy, ask who you're going to look to. That'll be the first thing I would ask.
The whole time, but whatever. I guess.
Then in terms of the subversion of democracy, you say it's a bad thing, or the subversion of democracy is a bad thing. I completely agree. If populations are swayed through propaganda, it's a negative for democracy, ideological control and manipulation. Absolutely agree. The issue is then the what we fall into is non-democratic, and that's the problem. Because it's been subverted. We're like, oh no, the population are being controlled and manipulated by a hierarchical system. Why would it? If it is a natural hierarchy, why shouldn't the individual who could subvert democracy and establish their own control over society, might makes right in this scenario, why shouldn't they do that if you believe that is the better form of this?
Exactly.
So the subversion of democracy is not something that you hate, it's something that you enjoy. So why are you using it as an argument against democracy?
Is that from your perspective, you are arguing that you want a pure democracy.
I do want a pure democracy.
Out of the second side of your face, you just said, why shouldn't the person go ahead, if they have the strong
on your side,
create an autocratic society based around the hierarchy, which is exactly what I propose that they do.
Yeah, I was saying, why ought they not do it? Why would the subversion be bad if we take your position to its end? So clearly, your problem isn't the subversion of democracy. It's democracy in the first place.
Well, no, democracy in and of itself would be fine if it was actually checked, like we had when we had a republic, meaning there's only certain people inside the democratic process that can vote, namely people who have stake in the game. Under your vision of pure democracy, people who have no stake in the game can vote themselves whatever monies they want out of the treasuries from people who do. And so it's very easy for the bottom rungs for the lower classes of the hierarchy to all get together, okay, and vote themselves whatever they want out of the public trough, whether or not they even put into the public trough or not.
Oh, I'd absolutely disagree. I'm a libertarian socialist, advocate for private property.
For democracies to become subverted. That's why it's so easy, because the lower rungs of society are always going to outnumber the higher rungs of society.
You can have you can have a constitution. You can have a constitution, as the United States does, that ensures certain rights. So then, like, for example, if the majority of the population wish to, subvert private property, they'd be inhibited by the Constitution. And look,
not inhibited by the Constitution.
Well, no, they are. Like, and one of the things that, like, even your own politicians, they don't agree on anything but the ideology of the Constitution. It's like, in the words of like Slavoj Žižek, it's the sublime object of ideology from which dictates the way in which many Americans think. You just think through the Constitution. It's one of the things that makes you American, and that's fair enough. I have no real issue with it. Like the main issue I have is when the Constitution becomes dogmatic and unquestionable, so that the individuals who wrote it are able to instantiate their will upon another. That seems fundamentally unfree. Yes, I do want to maximize freedom.
We don't want to be ruled by dead men argument.
Well, it's not that we don't want to be ruled by dead men. I don't want to be ruled.
You don't want to be ruled?
No.
Okay, so even though all of your society that you currently live in and the society that I currently live in has been expounded upon by hundreds and hundreds of years of collective wisdom, monarchs, everything in between, has constructed all of these various institutions, including the English common law that you likely live under right now, and probably appreciate, because it's a fairly
somewhat, it's got good and bad. It's good and bad.
But at the same time, you're going to say, "Well, I don't want dead men to rule me." They do rule you.
I don't want rulers. I want to have a conversation with dead men. I want to have. I want to have a.
finish this.
Sorry, I was just saying I would like to have a conversation with dead men. Absolutely, I think that there's wisdom to be gained from tradition. I do not deny that. I think that when I look back at British history, I can see a lot of good things. I can see a lot of bad things. A lot of things that were done well, and a lot of things that we can improve upon. And I think that in the memory and the wisdom of those individuals that once governed the state can be incorporated in how we go forth, and we can continue to follow in their footsteps and make a better and better society.
Yeah, ruled by dead men.
So not ruled, no.
You're going to listen to their collective wisdom. You're going to use their institutions that they put down. You're going to use their
question it, though.
Their laws, their everything. Yes, you do like being ruled by dead men.
It's not ruled. I like being ruled by reason and reason alone.
Okay, well, in your reasonable society, I love logic. I love reason. That's what I base my life around. And I can tell you right now, I live in a country that is demanding more and more democracy from a representative republic that was able to constrain government for maybe the first time in human history.
You think
actually really constrained it. And what they're trying to do is formulate more and more democratic processes so that the Constitution, as it was written, and the very restraints that were put on government become eliminated via the will of a small majority of people. And that's what's going on right now.
The hilarity of this whole argument is that the Constitution was written as a form of rebellion. Every one of the men who wrote their names on that Constitution were sentencing themselves to death if the British had caught them.
Okay, wait a second. I think you're conflating.
Sorry, the bill, the Declaration of Independence. Sorry.
Yes. You're saying the Declaration of Independence. We're talking about the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm saying that what constitutes your state was rebellion.
Okay, for sure, for the Declaration of Independence.
But the whole state is built upon individual freedom.
What's that?
The whole state was built upon an individual freedom.
It was built around the basis of telling the government what they're allowed to do, not telling them what they can't do. That's what it was based around.
It was based around not being governed by an individual, by a collective of individuals from which they could not power check. Yes, it was. I mean, the whole look. Why did the whole Boston Tea Party? The whole Boston Tea Party in the first place was to reject unjust taxation. From the British, so an unjustified form of government authoritarianly taking control of people that was rejected by the people for the people, and so the establishment of the American
propaganda. It's all fantastic propaganda.
That is your state.
Okay, yes, the Boston Tea Party happened. Okay, but the Revolutionary War that we fought, okay, had very little to do with individual freedom. It had very, very much to do with money. Okay, that's a debate we can.
I think I could probably agree with a lot of that.
But it had a lot. It had a lot to do with money. The foundational documents that we had, Benjamin Franklin said himself, "I'm giving you a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." And we have not been able to keep the republic, and we haven't been able to keep the republic intact because we've done things like women's suffrage. We gave women the vote. Let me explain. What this has done is it's expanded the voting bloc. More and more and more and more. And if you do that, there's provisions in the Constitution to change various amendments. Okay, here's another thing we did, for instance.
No, please continue on through women thing. I want that fleshed out, please.
It used to be that our senators were sent by the state. Now they're elected by popular vote. Okay, that has also created a huge problem. Basically, the more expansive the democratic state in the United States becomes, the easier it is for politicians or for special interests to vote out amendments that they don't like and personal freedoms that they don't care for. Corporate money is now involved in doing that, but they subvert the democratic process in order to do it. That is the primary goal. Bolshevik communists are definitely involved in some of that, but most importantly, if we had the original framework of the Constitution, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. I'd be happy-go-lucky. Okay, we would have a restrained government, but all the things I just listed to you, which most of them happen right here in the United States, that's not a restraint on government, and that was all done through opening up the Democratic caste, opening up and expanding voting rights for everybody. They can vote against their best interest if they're swayed properly, especially with bribes.
Well, what I would say is if individuals do vote against their best interests, the issue is not their vote, it's their inability to think critically. And so I would advocate for education and philosophy.
That's nice, but what are you going to do with the stupid people, man?
What am I going to do? Well, I mean, like, look, like the stupid people who, can't rule themselves. If we say, like, look, I think stupid people, it's kind of tentative. It's like whether there actually are people so stupid that they couldn't rule themselves. I don't think that's necessarily, an issue.
Wrong. You're wrong.
Well, and two, even stupid people have, sometimes have good arguments and good positions. So we judge their arguments and not simply, their intellect. So a good example is like, what's in your interests versus what's in somebody else's interests. A stupid person is still going to have an insight into their own lives. So if let's say a stupid person is, working a low-end, low-skilled job, and they really are suffering because of the exploitative nature of that job, they might understand the whole economic system, why it led them into this scenario. But what they do see is the outcomes, and what they do feel is the oppression, and so they seek to free themselves from it. Like in terms of the way in which you say people can be swayed and bribed, absolutely. That's wrong. It's subverting democracy. The democracy of the system shouldn't be so easily subverted, and I agree we should put protections to maintain democracy, but then that doesn't mean give it over to the authoritarian state from which we cannot challenge. So when someone wants to take your wife as the monarch and, on your wedding night, you've just got to sit and watch and just be that guy, No, we kill those people. We take back power from the monarchs. We do not allow individuals to dictate and control.
There was good monarchs that didn't do that, by the way.
But I rely on the benevolence of our kings.
What I'm saying to you
just want to be
exactly right. Let's restrain democracy. You can restrain democracy. Having pure democracy is not good. It's not good. We've proven now that it's not good.
I do not agree.
People will vote. They'll vote against their own self-interests out of the treasury because they're stupid. Let me give you an example of this. Why should somebody ever be able to nullify my vote if they can't name who the vice president of the United States is?
Well, I don't disagree that, and maybe, for example, we could have you could have licenses to vote, in which people have to pass
You want to limit democracy? See?
No, I think that like making democracy absolutely free and open, but then putting restrictions on what people can vote for in relation to their ability to understand the system. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, I think that people should be able to sleep with whoever they want, but then there's limits of consent. We don't let adults sleep with children precisely because they cannot consent. They do not understand the consequences of their actions. You don't need that's not a limitation. It's a freedom.
Right now, everybody who's at the age of 18 and not a felon can vote. If you want to give them a license to be able to vote, what is that doing?
Maintaining their right to vote.
It's shrinking the number of people.
It's not about numbers.
That are allowed to democratically vote. For instance, a progressive like Brittany up there.
Wait a minute. It's not about numbers.
Should people have licenses to vote? She'd say, hell no. Hell no, I don't want anybody to have licenses to vote.
Yeah, the only reason that I have an issue with it is who makes the license.
They want to have a stake, even if they have no actual stake, and that's the whole problem. A person down the street, if there's 10 of them who rent, can vote to up the taxes on my property.
And they probably should.
But they have no stake.
Like if I'm honest, right? Like obviously, thank you to Brittany for hosting this, and I do appreciate Brittany has her own views, and she might hate the idea of a license to vote, and it's something that I am tentative of, in the sense that I think it's a good idea if it wasn't going to be corrupted by the state and used as a way to instantiate power. So like who makes the tests? Who decides who gets a license? Well, is this going to be the state? And this is the issue. I think that in reality, the funny thing is you say like individuals can be swayed out of their self-interest. Well, at least they have the possibility of having self-interest. In a fascist state, there is no possibility of self-interest. There is the interest of the governor and the interest of the state. That is who
It wasn't
determines
true.
what is
It
good for.
wasn't true.
Like, take for example, those Germans who existed in Nazi Germany. Were their interests met when they were being gassed? Or how about those individuals who were in the USSR and another authoritarian regime who were marched to their deaths? Were their interests met? No, and they had no way of checking them, because even if they did have weapons, the monopoly of power would have crushed them, just the same as if the United States was fascist. The individuals within that state would struggle against the federal government and most likely face horrors before they managed to gain any level of freedom and establish a democratic government in the first place.
Instead is when the power structures are pulled down, usually an authoritarian regime is what's put in. That has been what's historically true.
Oh, I completely agree. The failure of revolution.
To take down the top echelons of monarchies, they usher in communism. They don't usher in anything else.
Well, they do. The failure is usually it's fascism. Actually, I'd say the failed revolution, and Slavoj Žižek even says this. No, it is. I mean, like, look. So, for example, like the theocratic regime in Iran, forced progression led to theocracy. We typically see we typically see authoritarian regimes pop up at failed revolutions. But I'm not a pro-revolutionary, so like I don't know who your argument's against.
Oh, I'm telling you that I'm giving you a roadmap for how democracy becomes so easily subverted, because lower rungs of society can vote themselves whatever they want out of the treasury, and they have no stake in the game.
What do you mean by lower rung?
Huh?
What do you mean by lower rung?
Okay, so let's say you make minimum wage. Okay. There's a lot more people who make minimum wage in the United States than make $500,000 a year. Would you agree that that's true?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's absolutely true, and it's inarguable. So knowing that there's more people who make minimum wage and they pay nothing in income tax whatsoever, they can arbitrarily vote together to raise your taxes to have it redistributed to themselves, correct?
Yeah, that would be correct.
Right. Okay.
Is it arbitrary though? I mean, that's where we're kind of coming into it.
So it's very easy then for small groups of people to utilize that voting chain with promises of giving them these other people's money over here for the purposes of instituting their own personal power.
Well,
how that works?
Well, actually, so first, I would say that the corporatists who have gained power on the backs of others have done so by subverting the concept of private property and used people to, increase their coffers on the backs of those individuals who are actually doing the work. It is, because those individuals who are earning more are typically the oppressors a lot of the time. Like for example, like the corporations such as like Microsoft, take Amazon. Like Amazon and Jeff Bezos with these ridiculous, wealth of over 200 billion isn't built on the genius and capabilities of Jeff Bezos. It's built on the backs of those individuals from which he exploits. And so when they decide to tax him and redistribute wealth, that's a way of trying to reclaim some of the wealth that is stolen from them in the first place.
To bribe the electorate to keep yourself in a perpetual position of power, which is why all the Democrats and Republican old guard politicians are still there.
Well, wait a minute. No, it's not. Look at it like this. Who controls the government? You just said yourself that it's...
You can't get rid of these people because they know
the government isn't controlled by the people in
utilizing other people's money.
Look, first, you live in a two-party state. The two parties are funded privately, and lobbying exists legally in your state. So corporations have an undue amount of power democratically.
Yeah, and people voted all of that in. They voted in the politicians who ushered that in.
The politicians weren't voted. The politicians weren't voted in the first place. The parties the politicians were established by the parties, put forward to run on the campaigns of the parties, and we have this political spectacle which allows people to think that they're actually being in a democratic system, when in reality they are being, the wool is being pulled over their eyes. Like when you vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whatever it is, you're not actually gaining any level of freedom no matter who comes in, because the corporations have hedged their bets in the first place.
Like they subverted democracy.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Exactly, they subverted democracy, and we really need to do something about it. I'm a libertarian socialist. I think that's a bad thing, and we need to correct it. You're the one arguing that it's a good thing.
We do need to do something about it. We need to limit democracy. And you've already
But why?
agreed with me by saying you want a
They've
license
already
to it.
limited democracy for you. Why are you asking for it to be limited again?
They're not limiting it. They're trying to expand it. They want to get rid of the Electoral College, for instance. That was one of the few checks that allowed democracy to even function.
But you just accepted that like corporations have an undue amount of power in our society, correct?
Of course.
Yeah, so corporations have an undue amount of power. So they have already, subverted democracy, as you've said, correct?
Well, no, they didn't subvert the democracy.
You just said that.
A weak government who can't restrain them is who's subverting democracy. These officials from government.
You said that it's
public
subverted
treasury
democracy.
money. They use public treasury money to bribe the electorate to continue to vote them in. And sometimes the public catches on. And what they do in the United States is they just import a brand new voting bloc that they can bribe.
I think it's hilarious. You're like, we need to limit democracy to stop these people limiting democracy. That is actually your argument right now. You're saying that corporations are taking undue amount of power. I agree. I say that we need to prevent this subversion of democracy, and then you put in its place.
All right, you guys.
Subversion of democracy.
What I'm saying.
You guys, okay, hold on.
If it's not restrained, okay, now, then what will naturally happen is fascism, a fascist state.
And that's
People
bad.
will demand it because of the hierarchical structure of humanity. That's where we're going.
No, I don't think that people demand fascism.
That doesn't mean that I heart fascism, okay? But I understand that the autocracy is the natural state of being with people who are in a survival situation. And if you continue to allow democracy to be subverted by not restraining it properly, by only allowing some subsects of the population, which usually under fascism this happens too, be the ones who have the stake and the vote inside of those societies.
I'm going to say first, why do you think people naturally go towards hierarchization in a form of fascism, which is uncontrollable authority? I mean, if you look at even in apes, in the governance of our nearest relative, like the bonobo, which I said. So even if you are to genuinely say that there is a human nature, and you're relating it to something that's wild, actually the bonobo is like a mixture of democracy and hierarchy. So they have a leader from which the group. Well, you're the one. You're the one.
I'm gonna have to start muting okay. So Andrew, let him finish.
Okay.
So you're the one that said that it's a form of nature. I don't think that there is such a thing as quote unquote human nature. I think that we have natural drives which are expressed through ideology and understanding, and that's the byproduct of language. And it's the reason that we have this level of self-knowledge and self-awareness. I'm able to understand myself as, for example, British. I'm able to understand myself as from Newcastle, Northern England, and all of these connections I make ontologically with the world allow me to express my will against the world. I'm able to express myself against the world, and these or in the world.
You don't believe in the alpha structure?
No, I think natural dominance hierarchies are the only people that would believe in natural dominance hierarchies are beta males, man.
Well, again, let's try this one more time. You don't think that there's any such thing as the alpha animal, even though in every single animal structure that we can possibly look at, almost without fail, there is an alpha animal.
Well, I just give the example of the bonobo, our nearest relative, having
the one example, the one outlier animal you can give me?
The one that's the nearest to us. Well, you're not a wolf.
Okay, I'm not a bonobo either. So
no, you're much closer to a bonobo than a wolf, though.
Well, I'm more like a pig with my digestive system than anything, though. But so one more time, there are alpha animals all over the place.
There are also look, it's that's like saying it's not even so clean cut. That's being dismissed, if I may.
I let you finish.
Let Andrew go. Let Andrew.
Within the structure of society, yes, people do move towards hierarchies. How can I prove this? I, on my side, have 10,000 years of recorded history, and you have a stupid theory. That's the difference between the two of us. 10,000 years of recorded history of hierarchies, stupid theory.
Actually, if you look at the recorded history of hierarchies, and if you can take pretty much anyone, take Machiavelli, for example, talking about the recorded history of hierarchy, wanting to establish a powerful sovereign state. One of the main things he points out is that the establishment of hierarchy led to political instability and a rising class of individuals which sought to destroy that hierarchy. Hierarchy's never been met with, authoritarian states have never been met with, blind acceptance. They're actually usually met with a lot of resistance and usually a lot of political instability, which is why he proposes. Sorry, what?
By other hierarchies.
No, not necessarily.
When two alpha societies meet, they fight. What a shock.
It's not two alpha societies. It's not like that, actually. I'm talking about the political instability within one society. And actually, the greater the political instability, really, the worse the society is going to perform against its competitors. I mean, David Hume actually, about 250 years ago, showed why, I think it was republics and democracies advance faster than monarchies, even though they're less authoritarian. The individual's ability to express ideas and perpetuate technology grows under something like even capitalism, which I'm not a fan of, but I do think that it's better than the states that come before it. Individual freedom is maximized in
industrial revolution to help them. Just saying.
But the industrial revolution.
Industrial revolution thing going on. Most current democracies did throughout human history. They didn't have industrial revolutions, not on the scale that we had. Especially going into the 20th century. So, yeah, I'm sure you could make the case.
Before the Industrial Revolution.
Technology advances much faster.
I mean, the political instability is before the
classical history. Monarchies have done just fine. Societies were plenty stable underneath most of them. Some of the European monarchies were a mess. Okay, but monarchies have existed for 10,000 years. People go towards natural leadership inside of their own societies.
I would say that people
Hoppe has explored this in depth. He wrote an entire book called Democracy, the God That Failed, proving it.
I don't think that there's ever been a proof that democracy failed. I think that
even our founders were part of a hierarchy. Okay,
but then you can. But the issue isn't with hierarchy anyway. The issue is with justified and unjustified hierarchy. I mean, democracy.
Well, human beings don't gravitate towards hierarchy.
I don't think that would do. I don't think that would gravitate towards unjustified hierarchy anyway, which is why I give the example of the bonobo, which was, essentially in terms of nature, which you're wanting to relate it to, not me, is more democratic than it is authoritarian.
So what? I don't care about the
you're the one that's arguing, like you're the one appealing to nature. I'm just saying nature isn't what you appeal to.
Human history.
Like what the problem is, like if I may, the problem is you're saying because nature we should be fascist, because nature we should be authoritarian, because people want hierarchy. My argument is that people don't just want hierarchy, they want justified hierarchy. So they want to go, actually, this person who's, who I want is the person I want to be my leader, because this person's better. Or, better again, we can have things like heterarchy, where it's like, okay, you have a special skill here, I have a special skill here, and we work together in cooperation, which is fundamentally the basis of, any form of social cohesion in the first place. Otherwise, the political stability of the state would be non-existent.
Well, sure, we could have this thing over here, we could have this thing over there, we could have that thing over there. But what we've classically had was none of that. What we've classically had is monarchies.
I don't care what we
classically had is strong men who are in charge, and oftentimes just by pure birthright. And if you have nationalism behind them, people tend to rally behind it like no other.
Because they're subverted by ideology. As you've rightly pointed out, people can be convinced of terrible ideas.
Well, sure, but I think that democracy is also a very convincing, terrible idea.
I don't see any argument for that. All you've said is that democracy can create political instability if it's subverted. And then I say we should put protections for democracy. Wait a second, I'll let you finish. So you said that the problem with democracy is that it can be subverted. I agree. It can be subverted. That would create political instability and we could fall into something like fascism, which is terrible. I don't want that. So we should put protections in to maintain democracy and fair elected leadership. Now, that's not even an issue of hierarchization. So appealing to hierarchy doesn't undermine democracy. It's not actually undermining hierarchy. And even people like, like Karl Marx and other socialists throughout history, they've all wanted hierarchy. I don't know one. Like, as a libertarian socialist, I'm not looking to get rid of organization and government. I'm looking to get rid of unjustified government, unjustified power. People who come in and tell me what to do when they don't have the right to come and tell.
Andrew, let him finish.
Sorry. You said that, you talked about birthright. Well, there isn't the birthright of another individual to tell another individual whether or not they're allowed to sleep with their wife or not. But that's what you're giving them the power to do.
That democracy gives them the power to do that also. The more pure a democracy becomes, in fact, such a right will exist as long as there's a simple will of majority to do it.
So you think that like the will of the majority establishes the will of the majority, though? That's the key of this of this.
The will of the majority is fascist by nature. Then why do I care if it's in?
Why would it be fascist by nature? Why would the will of the majority be fascist by nature? You haven't established that. You keep saying we're fascist by nature, but then you don't show that we're fascist by nature. You just say there have been authoritarian governments and that humans like hierarchies. That's all you've said.
I gave you nothing in my intro. I gave you nothing but examples of what I would consider totalitarian edicts set down from democratic governments. What are you talking about?
And I said that is wrong, unjust, and we need to get away from those things.
I proved it as concisely
You're
as
the one
possible.
arguing for them.
Democratic governments often, more often than not, and the more pure the democracy becomes, put authoritarians in charge all the time. And you can actually end up with societies that are much more perverse and far worse than something that's autocratic.
I think anyone who understands anything about democracy knows that we've never had like a full democracy and true democracy yet in any country. Two, so we've already had a level of authoritarianness within our states. And in the United States, you even agreed that it was corporate in origin, like it's corporatist, which I think is...
I didn't agree that it was corporate in origin. I just agreed that corporations were running amok.
Oh, running amok. Well, how are they running amok when they themselves are subverting democracy and doing, as you said, was the right thing to do?
Because there's no restraining arm on them, as I just told you.
Who's going to restrain them in fascism?
Oh, they're a fascist state, the government.
The government. But the government have been, as you rightly showed, have been subverted by the power of the corporations.
Right. Thus proving the problem with democracy.
No, because how is that proof? Like, imagine, I want you to imagine this example, right? So now you've got a fascist state that controls the monopoly of violence, which limits freedom of speech, which limits freedom of was it like freedom to of public assembly, protest, freedom to. Oh yeah, I agree. There is issues with what's happening now. Don't get me wrong. Like, and we, that's we can call that into question, and then we say like, is this democratic? Has our society went too far? Blah blah blah. That's fair enough, but that doesn't mean that because we have limitations on our freedom now, it justifies further limitations. And never mind, like as I was saying, like imagine a corporate society, right? Like understanding the economy as separate to politics is just misguided. For one, power is money. Money is power. And so like when we understand that, you can see that like corporations, globalized corporations, take for example from China, would be able to exert their will upon the United States and have no ability to be questioned if they manage to capture the government through bribery. The monopoly of power would then be Chinese owned, and you've subverted your own sovereignty. Now, I want the sovereignty of the United States to exist in the hands of the people of the United States.
Okay.
So why don't you? Why do you want, let's say, China to come over and buy up your government, and then you have to be subject to them?
Not only do I not want that, but I'm saying that the only way to restrain the corporate arm at this point is through some type of fascist government, because progressives won't do it, and they're in charge. Okay? They're not ever going to restrain the very hand that feeds them. It's not going to happen. The leaders are in there for good now. They're not going anywhere. They're getting rid of the Electoral College. It's already a done deal. So what's going to happen? Democratic. Okay, that's just the way that it's going to go.
You're saying that it's the way that it's going to go. That like even if this was a political prediction, even if it is a political prediction, mate, even if you are right that it is going that direction, that's something that like I think most right-wing people in the United States go, oh shit, we need to stop that. And stop it from.
You don't have the political power to stop it.
Well, that's why,
because the demographic shifts have been such that you're able to bribe new people coming into the country who are brought in for low labor jobs with the public trough.
Oh wait. For one, let's actually question that whole stupid thing about like was it like Mexicans are being brought in to stand up establish the Democrats. One.
Well, let me prove it. Let me just give you my logic behind it.
Okay, I'll let you give that argument, and I'll listen.
Holes in it if you want to.
Okay.
Because Destiny sure had a hard time with it.
Okay.
So let's give it a shot. Okay. Democrats are for massive migration from Mexico and South America. It just so happens that the same people who are coming in from Mexico and South American nations vote almost primarily Democrat. We're talking in super majorities of 65% plus nationwide. When they get here, they go almost instantly on the public dole. Okay, almost instantly on the public dole. This is a subsidy because they're being brought in to work those low-wage jobs. Okay, so what's happening is one political party is importing via mass migration their own voting bloc, which they then can bribe with my money. That is called subversion of democracy, and that's really what's going on. It's actually happening right now, and we've been seeing it for about 15 years, and now under Biden it's getting 10 times worse.
Okay, so let me see if I can poke some holes in that. So you believe that for example, people are being brought over from Mexico maybe in the rate of like 150,000 a year, which is I think the
not even close.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
Close.
That's actually the 2015 figure.
But you're forgetting about the 50 million illegals that are here about to get amnesty too. But go ahead. Right.
Well, one, I don't know if we have an official figure on how many illegal immigrants there are in the country. So who's making the estimates there? I'm not going to like accept that unless it's got like a legit methodology behind it.
It does have legitimate census data behind it.
I would have to you can't make a census on people who don't fill in census forms.
You can do it based on estimates from the U.S. Census. Yes, you can.
But how do you estimate how many people?
Because they have, I don't know, they have data that they use to estimate these things.
So I don't know. They have data is your argument.
Between 11 and 50 million. But forget it for a second. Let's go back to your point.
Well, right? It's a hell of a difference, 11 to 50 million.
And that there's no estimation that's correct for illegal immigrants. But we can agree that it's at least over 10 million, I'm sure, right?
I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if there's about 10 million people. Yeah, like fair enough. Right. But you've got a population of 76 billion, I think, haven't you?
What's the largest demographic? What's the largest demographic being imported, shifting the demographics in the United States? Do you know what it is? It's Hispanic.
Well, perhaps depends on it is perhaps because actually I think the largest voting population in almost every Western hemisphere, in all of the Western hemisphere, is actually people over the age of 60. We have an aging population, and the majority of the population.
We're breaking it down by race, though, not by age.
Well, I think considering that the majority of your population is actually white.
Yeah, but it's not a large majority, and that's my whole point. I'm talking.
It's a considerably large majority, actually.
Talking about the shifting demographic. Whites don't vote for Democrats typically.
Well, actually, that's not true at all.
It is.
I know lots of white people that voted Democrat, but
explain it to you. What was Trump's base? Trump's base was mostly white voters, mostly white men, especially who were working class men.
Yes.
Okay.
People who are
whites overwhelmingly vote Republican.
And typically in certain, for example, a lot of them were in, southern states, conservative backgrounds, and I think I've been a young white guy in a poor, for example, I come from one of the poorest places in the UK, and I grew up on one of the poorest neighborhoods of the UK, and there is a tension and anger towards the state of why you're here, why you are being treated this way, why society has allowed this to happen to you. And I think that a lot of poor white guys in this scenario, like the same as me, turn towards something like they're like, right, well, we need to do something about it. And the way that they look towards that is by establishing their own power, trying to vote in someone who typically goes up against a scapegoat ideologically, that immigrants are coming in and taking their jobs, rather than the corporations who are deliberately trying to bring them in to take their jobs, to pay them less. But he has me poking holes in what you've just said. So, for example,
can you see that? Can you read it?
1 second. Let's see.
Census shows what?
What was it? AP News. Census shows white decline, non-white majority among youngest.
What's going on is through
But the
shifting
young, I just said
demographics.
you already have an aging population. The majority of your population are older white people.
So what's happening is
So
the
what you're saying that the
demographic from
Democrat,
down south, the shifting demographic down south that all
Wait,
votes
so
to a
you
majority
wait a minute.
Democrats,
So you
is
think that
coming out,
the
getting on the public dole and then continuously voting them into power. That's
well,
what's going
no,
on.
like one, that's
Yes.
definitely not the case. As we've just said, that the demographic would then be young people, and we're already established that you have an aging population, and mostly your population in terms of a voting class are older white people.
Young Hispanics are also voting for them in wild
So
numbers.
older white people are actually your largest voting group. But two, like, look, immigration in the United States. How long does it take to become a citizen capable of voting in the United States? Well, it takes, before you can become a citizen, you need a U.S. green card, right?
It takes 10 minutes and $1 million to buy a citizenship. In the
No,
United States.
it takes $1 million to get a green card.
No, it takes $1 million to buy an actual citizenship.
I'm pretty sure it's a green card in the United States,
it's
and then you
citizenship.
apply for citizenship.
Same in the UK. I think it's like $850,000 to buy citizenship there.
You can, yeah, but one, we just agreed that you said that, well, like the poorest people, like coming over, going on to public dole. I don't even care. I don't even care if you can make it like 5,000. That's still not going to be able to afford it.
Yeah, I'm sure that wouldn't subvert democracy, having a bunch of foreigners pay millions of dollars.
But they're not paying millions of dollars, because you're the one that said they're poor, and because of that poverty, they're going on the dole, and so voting for the Democrats, who are increasing.
I'm not talking just about the poor demographic.
Well, what do you think you're being flooded with millionaires?
Okay, listen to what I'm saying to you. Okay, if you were talking about the subversion of democracy, then if you have people pay $1 million for citizenship, they also can subvert democracy if they're foreigners and they come in and don't have your interests at heart. On top of that, you also have the southern invasion that's going on, and it is an invasion.
Wait a minute.
And the borders are being left unsecure.
Look,
they're being left unsecure on purpose.
I think
so that they come in
before we
and
get to
displace
that.
the demographics that are here.
That
one party
I'll question the invasion hypothesis in a second, but let us at
what
least.
point does it become an invasion?
Well, we'll talk about the definition of an invasion and acts of hostility against against the state. But let's before we get to that point of whether you're being invaded by poor people who struggle to survive and work for an invasion force, they're really doing a terrible job taking the United States. One terrible job at a time. But the thing is that look, and
they can vote.
Look,
you get it yet? They can vote.
But yes, they can vote, but they still.
If they take low wage jobs,
wait, let's finish. Right? So you said that they are coming over and subverting the democratic process. I said that, okay, it's about 150,000 Mexicans, for example, every year. It's actually quite a low number, considering the population size of the United States is actually 38 billion. Right? Wait a minute. Then, if you look at, and it is controlled immigration, you don't let everyone in. That's just not what happens. The USA immigration process requires you to get a green card, which means you have to get the possibility of voting. So to get a green card, you've got to live at least it takes 7 to 33 months just to get a green card. And then obviously you've got to have employment. Then when you say that, so for example, to go onto the dole, well, that's absolutely untrue, because you need to be a citizen before you're going to be qualifying for the dole. So if you look at how long it takes to be a US citizen, 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a US citizen. And then it's 6 months for an application of that. So if we average it out about 5 years altogether, for an individual to become a citizen, they wouldn't even have been quote unquote naturalized or whatever into the voting class by the time the election comes around. So that's just not what's happening. And then if you look at the possibility, and two, this is all hypothetical in the sense, look, a great deal of individuals are coming over from a low income basis, and your explanation for that is the most convoluted conspiracy, rather than what is clear, which is the exploitation of what have been considered union breakers throughout society. We know that individuals from poorer backgrounds are brought over to subvert the unionization, and the increased unionization of Americans can testimony to this. The greater the unionization, the greater the call for higher wages. The greater call for higher wages, the less likelihood that they are going to hire someone who will be likely to unionize. They will hire people who will take a lower wage, who are usually immigrants. So they are actually subverting It's not about politics in the sense of
let's
who
try
votes
this
for
one more
who.
time.
Like
I'll
let's
try one more
and the worst part of this
what
all
you
is
did.
the
This is
worst.
for you.
Wait, if I
One
may,
party-
one last thing, and then I'll let you speak. One last
Okay.
thing, like it's not about who votes for who. It's about how much money can be made. Money is power, right? And if more money can be made off immigration, then that is essentially what the Democrats are going to allow. Corporatists who control the Democrat Party are going to push for higher immigration so that they can exploit, immigrant workers, just as the Republicans are usually promoting their own economic interests. The reality of the situation is you're not fighting an invasion of Mexicans like coming into the country to subvert your democratic process. You're actually seeing a tide of desperate people who have been deprived by global capitalism to use them to subvert a growing political consciousness and an attempt to gain back some level of autonomy from the corporations who rule them. So what you're saying isn't the subversion of democracy. The subversion of democracy happened long before that.
Well, sure, it's graduated, but most importantly, let me try to explain this to you one more time, because I don't think that you're understanding it very well.
I think I am.
Okay, you're going on these wild tangents. One party tailors legislation for massive welfare for immigrants who are coming in. The very immigrants that they're bringing in just so happen to be the very immigrants that vote them into power. Do you understand that? That's not conspiratorial. That's what's happening.
Well, it is,
right
because I've just said that the ones that come in,
people are coming in and doing low-wage jobs and can be exploited by that one party for power doesn't mean it's any less true that they're coming in and democracy is able to be subverted in that manner.
Well,
okay, really quick before you guys get back into this, we are going to start to close this down in a few minutes. But for anybody that wants to have any questions, if you want to tag Politically Provoked, we can take a few questions. Carry on. But I was just going to give you
I
guys
don't
a
have to
little
go straight for 9. I can stay for a little while longer anyway because of the way that my schedule's worked out. So I'm not in any rush if that's any.
Okay.
But and thank you for hosting. I think that like just to clarify, like I think that your explanation is a very long-winded explanation of how democracy could be subverted. Like bringing over, let's say, quote-unquote Hispanic voters to subvert democracy by paying them off with taxation not only alienates a massive amount of the population, by the way, who are a much bigger voting demographic, the right-wing American...
A shrinking voting demographic.
Well, shrinking, quote-unquote, like, still vast...
From 1965 at 92% to 65% right now. That's shrinking, sir.
Look,
like you can't believe.
The vast majority of the United States is, like, white Americans, man.
65%.
And also, when we come, not only is it just white Americans, but not only are white Americans aren't the only people that vote Republican, and they're not the only people that, that don't like high taxation. So, for example, like, in terms of, like, for example, you're assuming that, like, for example, there was actually quite a few rallying parties. There was a massive growth, I think, in, like, Hispanic, like, Latin American votes for Trump. People were rallying around that, like, Latin
percentages in a couple of states.
And then
it's Cuban, not Hispanic from South America, just so you know.
The
battleground states were almost all completely swung by the Hispanic vote.
I would like to see the data around that, for one, and then two, what's wrong with people voting in their own interests anyway?
Let me try one more time. Texas is only a battleground state or becoming a battleground state because of the Hispanic vote. Arizona, Hispanic vote. California, which was traditionally a very right-wing area for a long, long time, has been almost completely and totally.
But like you're putting it down. You're putting it down.
100% Democrat,
look,
except in the
I think
outlying
the funny
areas,
thing is
because of the Hispanic vote.
You're putting it down to race. You're putting it down to race.
These Democrat strategists don't know their voting block.
Look,
and they don't know that they need to tailor the interest to that.
You're putting it down to race when it can be explained through class. So, for example. Let's say, quote, like, Latin American voters are typically some of the poorest people in the United States, correct?
No, blacks are.
No, actually, I think the lowest, I think it was actually lower than, like, the severity of poverty in black communities could be higher, but the lowest income was Latin Americans in the United States.
Illegal or legal?
Legal.
I don't think that's correct.
It is correct. I mean, last time I'll have to double check. I mean, I'm open to be corrected on that.
Economic demographic.
But the point of the matter is that usually considerably poor, which is why you're saying they're going on the dole, they're being bribed. And the funny thing is that it's not like they could be bringing over like poor people from any nation. It's a class issue. It's not a race issue.
I agree. I'm not saying it's a color issue.
And then so if we agree, it's nothing to do with color. So it's nothing to do with them being Latin American. What we can see is the Democrat Party is tailoring its.
Hey, Andrew.
Your countrymen, sir. I wouldn't give a shit who.
Look. What we're seeing there is the Democrat Party tailoring its voter to a voter base, and that voter base is the lower classes of individuals. Because that liberals, that's what they do. They try to get the lower classes on side. That's why that's essentially why their policies are all.
So what's going on here is they're picking their voter instead of the voter picking them. Do you recognize the difference?
One, I think that's very contestable for what the rates of immigration aren't high enough. Two, the time it takes to actually make them voters is longer than the election time between elections.
They're going to give them amnesty right now. Right this second, they're packaging amnesty.
Okay.
Sorry, if I may just say, I think that it's very contestable. You're saying that they're coming over for the benefits. What benefits does the United States have? Wait a minute. Let's finish. Let's just finish with that. So the United States has one of the poorest welfare states globally. And just north from the United States is Canada, which actually has a pretty good welfare state.
That's true.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look at some of the
Okay, so let's
have a look. Let's have a look at the U.S. welfare state versus the Canadian welfare state.
Are you going to disagree that the United States doesn't have a better social infrastructure and benefit system than Latin American nations?
I mean, it depends. I think Cuba's is probably arguably almost as good as yours.
Okay. We'll leave.
We'll just leave Cuba out of it because Americans having to go to Cuba because they can't afford healthcare in your own nation. That would really.
So what? It's beside the point. Let's say
it's beside the point.
Let's say Cuba has the bestest that's ever existed. I don't care. I'm talking about the immigration, the mass immigration that's coming from south of the border.
It's not coming for benefits. It takes too long for them to get benefits.
Are you going to let me finish? I let you finish.
Sorry, you did. Yes. Sorry.
We're going to have that. We most certainly have a better healthcare system than most Latin American countries. And if you come in illegally, you will be treated for free. You cannot be denied care here ever for any reason at any time. That's one. Two, the social safety nets that are here for immigrant housing, low income housing, et cetera, are insane in comparison to Latin American nations. So they can come in, work for Walmart for $7.25. Even if you bump it up to 15, they'll still qualify for all of those immigrant subsidies, low-income housing subsidies, food stamps, et cetera. So what the hell are you talking about? We have a very generous welfare state.
Generous? No, it's not.
For our people. Your only concern is
as a European. As a European, I can tell you. As a European, I can tell you that your welfare state makes me want to cry, and I'm not the only one. The welfare state in the United States against any other Western nation is against any other developed nation from which, of course. So poorer people from
so they're immigrating to where
they're immigrating to a wealthier, but they're not really benefiting. One, I've already said that Canada has a far better welfare system, and two, it takes them too long to get the welfare in the first place. They're coming in for the jobs. A lot of the time, they are gaining a greater opportunity in the United States than they are from welfare. So they're gaining, for example.
I agree. They get a greater economic opportunity in the United States.
Of course,
Democrats give them heavy social programs to incentivize them to come in because they're a voting bloc. Now, you say Canada has much better benefits to its people than the United States.
Yes.
How come they're not just traipsing across the United States and into Canada then?
Because I don't think that they're moving for purely one, economic reasons. I think there's ideological reasons, and I think two.
You just said it's for economic.
And two. No, I said that it was economic reasons in terms of opportunity, not in terms of dole. And I think
It's
that's
because Canada won't let
you're the
them
one
in.
that said it was dole and not
Because
opportunity.
Canada has strong border policy, and it will not let them in because they know it'll bankrupt their social welfare state. They
That's
know
not
it.
true at all. For one, like
true.
take for example, even Germany. Take for example, like they let like 1 million people in. Germany's economy just absorbed 1 million people, no problem, because it's one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Like the reality is the amount of wealth that we actually have is like, don't get me wrong, in terms of immigration, I think there has to be a limitation on immigration. I don't think that it's a sustainable policy. We typically, actually, if you look at the American immigration process, it's inherently racist. You take the brightest and most capable people from other countries, and you bring them over to the United States as, you know, class one priority immigrants, and then use them to bolster your economy. I don't think
I agree with you on there. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. So like the reality is, it's like your immigration. I've not heard the Democrats. Sorry, if I may finish. I've not heard the Democrats trying to change the immigration policy to allow what are they called, like third class, I think, immigrants, like essentially like lower in the priority, third priority immigrants to be bolstered. No, the top priority is like highly skilled, engineers, doctors, teachers. Like that's the reality of the situation. It's the brain drain.
We're not being flooded with high-skilled immigrants, sir.
Yeah, because you can't exploit them.
Low-skilled, low-labor immigrants from the south of the border that vote only Democrat for the most part in supermajorities, and have swung massive demographic states into battleground states that never traditionally were ever. That is a political ploy. It's designed to subvert the current democracy we have, to have the nation remade in whatever image that they want.
I don't think that you can instantiate that. That's a jump, man. Like, seriously, I understand what you're saying, but it is a jump. Like, it can be explained through purely economic reasons of wanting to exploit those individuals.
You can explain it, I suppose, through purely economic reasons, but that's not the reason.
Well, why is it not the reason?
It's a good reason for them to have the motivation to come up. But if you didn't have the strong welfare social safety nets that weren't available to them in Latin American nations, they wouldn't be coming.
That's not true. Like, for example, I remember I had a conversation with an illegal immigrant. I had a conversation with an illegal immigrant in London, a Somalian illegal immigrant.
So what? I'm talking about American immigrants.
I know, but like, no, but it's just relevant. It's anecdotally relevant. So, for example, he was saying that, he was like, why do you think people come here? Like, like legally and illegally and stuff. He's like, why do you think like the people in Calais want to get through? I was like, I don't know. Like, he's like, a lot of people think it's the benefits. He's like, no. He's like, get better benefits in Germany. You get better benefits. He's like, you get better benefits in Germany. You get better benefits in Scandinavia. He's like, they come here for the opportunity because you can get a job and you can learn the language of this country and then get a job within like a certain amount of time. In Germany, for example, you've got to learn the language in like to the point in which you're nearly fluent. In the UK, you don't. The difference in terms of opportunity in the United States is really what pulls people in. And funnily enough, it has more to do with the global economic regime of keeping them poor so that they can be used to subvert the poor in the United States. Like, traditionally, you will see that the poor white Americans are being like subverted by people bringing immigrants over to make sure that they can't unionize properly. But that's not to do with it's not for the benefit of Hispanic people being bought off. It's Hispanic people being bribed and exploited for the interests of corporations who fund the Democrat Party and who fund the Republican Party. I'm not going to lie, like, it's far worse than what you think. Yours is like a long way around conspiracy in which democracy is being subverted. Democracy doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the first place.
You just agreed with it. You just agreed with it, and then you called it conspiracy in the same sentence.
I didn't agree with it. I said that it can be explained through economic reasons.
That's your position. Fine. Then you and I are both in unison that we don't need mass migration to the United States.
No, I think that there's nothing wrong with economic migration. What's wrong is how we treat immigrants and how we treat workers, and that's what we need to challenge, because that's what's giving this scenario in the first place. That's why we have this scenario.
They can't be exploited if they're not here, sir.
Well, they can't be exploited if they're not here. Well, that's not true, because they are currently being exploited in their own countries through an economic regime that is being perpetuated by the global powerhouses that exist in the Western Hemisphere.
Hey, I'm not going to argue that happens. Okay,
so they can be exploited if they're not here, which is why they keep coming here.
Of course that happens. But to some degree, it's in the Western Hemisphere interest to allow that to happen. And in some degree, it's even in the poorer countries' interest to allow corporatization to some extent. So, I mean, that's a whole different argument that we can get into at a different time because it's pretty broad, but I think we'd probably find a lot of common ground on it. I'm not arguing that corporatism is good. It's not good. I'm arguing that we need a big Papa fascist restraining hand on corporations.
But big Papa fascist restraining hand is going to be bought by a corporation.
Democracies like ours are just really good at being subverted. After they're subverted, you end up with regimes like you can't even imagine, communist regimes, these types of things that dig the ditches, put the bullets in your head and kick you in them. And this is what's happening.
That happened in fascism. That happened in fascism as well. And look, fascists...
No, it wasn't what happened in fascism, not in Franco's Spain. Some people went to camps for re-education, but we have to go to camps right now for re-education. What the hell's the difference?
Look, I'm not gonna lie. Look at the way that fascist governments have operated throughout history. It subverts political opposition in order to maintain the desired regime of the individuals who control it. So a political elite, it's a plutocracy, right? Yeah. And so with that plutocracy, those poor white Americans who you so love, who are being, essentially subverted by, the quote unquote, political system, are going to be crushed by that plutocracy.
Well, it depends. They could be liberated. There's a lot of people who point at fascist nations and say that was the best way to keep stability inside of the country.
Stability for who? And the will for who? The whole point is that the benefit,
of the people
even if it's
the stability of the people who are there who want to retain their national identity. Inside of communist and fascist nations, you don't have open borders. You have strong wills and national sovereignty. The nation takes precedent.
And then that leads to
in this case, you have a grab bag free for all, where people can come in willy-nilly all they want.
The strong nationalist structure creates antagonism with a lot of your neighbors, and then you end up going to war and sending millions of Americans to their death, for example.
We've had more warfare under democracy than any other system
We've had more warfare under capitalism. I think associating it with democracy is not necessary. And if we look, 2 world wars were fought against authoritarian regimes, mate.
By authoritarian regimes.
The largest wars in human history were perpetuated by 2 authoritarian regimes.
Yes, and also were fought by other authoritarian regimes against authoritarian regimes.
Well, they were fought by pseudo-democratic regimes.
We sided with communists, for instance, to take out the fascists.
And the communists, we sided with the communists because it was a venture of mutual advantage. It was we'll actually try to subvert the communists before that.
Heavy authoritarian governments fought with heavy authoritarian governments, be they democratic
and alongside pseudo-democratic governments.
The President of the United States has complete and total unilateral control over the United States military
now. The president has way too much power.
Any declaration of war ever having been declared.
Yeah, I agree. The president has way too much power, and I think, funnily enough, Americans agree with that.
No restraint. Democratically, these people are elected, and it does not stop.
Well, that kind of nobody can give them the force. The whole point of why fascism's wrong is because they're given undue authority.
What I'm saying is that since fascism is inevitable, we might as well pick the fascism with qualifiers we want. Since
you can't pick.
Communists and socialists can have all the qualifiers you want.
This is the
thing.
I
want fascism with qualifiers also.
No, this is the thing. You can't pick and choose in fascism. That's the point. Somebody does it for you.
Of course you can.
And what do you do when they don't do what you want them to do?
You can have fascism with something akin to a Napoleonic code. You can have an elite class in society. We had an elite class in society in the United States for most of our history.
Who writes your laws? Who writes your code?
Huh?
Do you really trust the government to do what's in your interests and not what's in their interests?
I trust the government to do what's in my interest more than I trust corporations to do what's in my interest.
The government exploits you on behalf of the corporations.
Less than all of it, because I've watched in front of my own eyes under democratic systems the most Orwellian systems I could ever imagine come to fruition right in front of my eyes.
What are you talking about? Orwellian is a
they lock us in our homes. They shut our businesses down. They give complete unilateral power to one individual. All done in a democratic system.
Orwell was writing to criticize authoritarian regimes.
Yeah. So, he was an anti-fascist. But again, watching these Orwellian things happen made me realize...
You can't say something's Orwellian and that's bad whilst you're calling for an Orwellian state.
To you if you'll let me. Yes, I agree with you. I would love to have constitutionally restrained government. We can't have that. The more pure a democracy gets, the second people realize they can vote their way to the treasury of the United States, they can essentially subvert democracy any way that they want to. Okay, under fascism, under strong autocratic leadership. I'm not saying you have to have Franco's Spain. I'm not saying anything like that. Monarchy would be the thing I'd be after more than anything. And under a monarchy,
please take our queen. You can have
there
her.
are codes that happen. And under fascism, you can implement codes also.
So if you guys want to maybe do some closing statements, because we are going to shut this down soon. I think we do, and then we have, I think, maybe like 2 questions so far.
Yeah, it's early in the afternoon here. This isn't the target audience's time zone usually.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Obviously, it's time issues. Obviously,
there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, well, we're the ones that dictated the latitude, sort of GMT sort of thing. So maybe if I begin, democratic control and change the time zones for the debate.
Yeah.
Like I said, my fascist society where the trains ran on time, you would have been here on time. So,
well, funnily enough, like it's actually a misconception that, like, for example, Mussolini made the trains run on time. He made one train run on time, and that was just to get him to the point.
And if you were on that train, you would have got here on time.
Yeah. So anyway, the I do think it's funny that you use Orwellian, Orwellian as an insult when you're calling for an Orwellian state. I think that.
Well, no, to the degree that Orwell's state was how he described it. I've never seen fascism in that degree, and neither of you.
What do you talk? Absolutely have seen fascism.
No, you haven't. They weren't gluing your eyes open.
Look. Oh, okay, maybe not gluing your eyes open, but I think it's analogous. I think that's the whole point. It's a metaphor, isn't it? It's an act of fiction.
Yeah,
but
it's metaphorical.
Yeah, like so, and it was, and I think that like
autocratic societies are more efficient, and if they honor the borders, I'm willing to go towards autocracy, man. Because otherwise, we'll lose our national identity anyway. What makes me is gone.
Like the hilarious thing. Well, that's not true. What makes you you isn't determined by your national identity anyway. Like what makes you you is an individualist identity, and that individualism at this point in time has nothing to do with really being American or not. It has more to do with what markets are selling you. Your identity is controlled by corporations that sell you, like your clothes, the things that you like, and the way that you would express yourself within markets. That's the kind of like hegemony that exists today. It's far more subversive than something as simplistic as an authoritarian regime. But the thing is that like
So what?
Like
you're making my point for me.
No, I'm not.
All of that happened inside of democratic societies.
Yeah. Like the democratic societies have been subverted by power structures that existed in capitalism. I wish to dismantle capitalism.
I have no argument with you against capitalism and putting the restraining God hand on capitalism.
But fascists love capitalism, man. Fascism has always been akin with fascism. In Nazi Germany. I mean, hell, look at China right now. Look at China right now.
For a purely anti-capitalistic society.
Look at China right now. I cannot think of, if I'm honest, I can't think of a better example of a fascist state. No,
it's a mixed communist nation.
It's not a fascist to say that, I mean, like, saying that it's mixed communist is begging the question. It is not a stateless, classless society. It's very much a state-orientated, class-based society running with a capitalist economy and an authoritarian government. So I'm sorry. China's fascist, man.
Absolutely seem to love it. The population seems to boom, and they're overwhelming and overtaking every society on planet Earth.
The population boomed because it was an ideological thing put forward by like a general back about 200 years ago, where he said not 200 years ago, like 100 years ago nearly, basically saying that big families were good for the state.
Because he said you couldn't make the population boom.
And look, and like if you look at like how China, like the popularity of the state in China is a lot to do with the ideology of how the Chinese government subvert criticism. So people can't even talk about why the state's bad. So you never end up with people questioning the state. So then you get a dogmatic, Hitler Youth-esque society where people are put into.
I didn't say anything about Hitler.
No. I said Hitler. I said Hitler Youth-esque society. It's about dogmatism.
Okay, so, but that aside, right now under our capitalist nations, I can hardly criticize the government without it being censored, sir.
I think you get censored a lot less here than you do in China. I mean, if you're a proponent of free speech,
now,
you don't want an authoritarian.
Whole news feeds get wiped off the internet if they don't like what you're saying. Right now, you can be depersoned. You can be deplatformed.
You know, the entire Chinese economy is dictated by by what is an authoritarian ruler, and like in fascism historically, the entire news networks were controlled.
Fascism is pretty new. You can qualify fascism with whatever you want. It's a pretty much a new system.
This fascist state's going to have a government that really cares and is going to try and promote free speech. And then
monarchies have had governments that have cared.
That's not true necessarily.
Yes, it is.
They've had sometimes.
The Japanese feudal system.
For example, so if we look at, let's say, the arguably like some of the good monarchs, like I think was it James II. I think it was in Britain, who said that the legislators should be held to the legislation, like the king is not above the law. They are very rare. And even then, you're reliant upon their benevolence. You're like, oh, I hope he's a good guy. I hope the next king's not going to absolutely wreck her.
I hope the king of Hungary, who went through and completely redid the entire nation and built great public works and took great care of its people. Yes, there are autocoses that have worked.
There are sometimes benevolent. There are sometimes benevolent leaders.
Classically been an autocracy.
You think I'm let's say idealist for wanting a population that votes in its own interests, when you're being such an idealist that you're hoping that you get a non-narcissistic, psychotic leader that isn't going to run you into the ground. When history has taught us...
psychotic leader than 1,000 psychotic leaders.
Oh, no. One, you don't have necessarily... if we look at the way in which the government functions, it's not like 1,000 leaders. You have like one or two which are held to the legislation. That's the idea of democracy.
You have thousands between local governments, state, you know what I mean?
Which are the whole point of, but decentralization increases the ability to hold them to power. So it's better to have a leader closer to you. Yes, it is.
It doesn't, because what ends up happening is they're able to put people in positions of lifelong appointments. And tens of thousands of them all over the country for lifelong appointments.
The way that democracy works in the United States, and we've already agreed, it's pseudo-democratic. You even refer to them as authoritarian, as when they were fighting the fascists. Don't say that those lifelong appointments in the first place is a subversion of democracy. What I'm promoting is a promotion of democracy. So we remove those blocks that prevent legislators being held to the legislation. And the funny thing is, the conservative base in the United States wants freedom of the individual. They're libertarian in origin. They're not, and it's all about freedom of the individual. Now, I mean, hell, you fought wars to promote the freedom of the individual.
I agree.
So you just want democracy. You don't want fascism.
No, you can have individual freedom even while you follow social hierarchies.
It's not individual freedom if your government can silence you and prevent you from speaking.
And doable, but has been done. Look at the Napoleonic Code. That's one such example of that being done. It can be done. It has been done successfully. So you're wrong.
No,
it's just
I'm not wrong. So let's take, for example, more let's say like closer forms of fascism to what is being newer forms of fascism, where technocratics subversion of the state, where people basically tell people what to think, what to do and what to feel in terms of ideology. I think that's for example, re-education camps, as you've said.
That's an extreme form of democracy. I agree.
That's not an extreme form of democracy.
It happened in a democratic nation where it's becoming more and more democratic every day. So it seems to me we can pin it on democracy. Then
I don't think that we can pin that on democracy, because at the end of the day, a true democracy benefits from critical thinking. If you're wanting to maintain general individual freedom, you will want an educated, understanding voting class who acts in the interests of each other. That would be the ideal. I would hope people learn philosophy and you teach critical thinking and reasoning to people, so when they vote, that vote actually. And in which
the problem is that if you have
in fascism, they ban the opposition, man. For example, take Erdogan in Turkey. You can't oppose the state anymore. We're leading towards fascism. Vladimir Putin in Russia. you can't oppose Putin without being killed. The whole thing is, if your will, what is good for you, goes against the state in fascism, you are royally done for, man.
We can't completely call those fascist nations, one, and you would call them dictatorships.
I said moving
and
towards.
Two, again, the fascist ideology is degreed, just like the socialist ideology is degreed.
Okay,
these are theoretical things that we're discussing.
Give
here.
me a form of fascist ideology which can maintain individual freedom from the sovereign, like from the leader.
I can't name any form of government that can do that.
See, I can. I think a minarchist or an anarchist government could do that. Sorry.
Theoretically,
one second. I think Todd was going to speak.
Andrew?
You're talking about theoretical shit.
Hello.
Okay, yeah.
Hello, Lewis,
okay.
Andrew. Hey, we're up against our 2-hour wall here. I thought this went swimmingly, as a friend of mine says. I would love to have you back on, Lewis. I'm going to pass it to Brittany. Andrew, thank you again, too. Just because we have other things that are planned, interviews and everything else, I really do appreciate this. This went great. I do want to bring up Iberian ham and A5 Wagyu, Lewis. You might want to look into that. Those animals are treated very well before they are put to slaughter. So anyway, but thank you very much. I'm going to pass it to Brittany. Do you guys have closing arguments? I mean, we kind of ran over that, but
Well,
like I said,
Brittany,
Brittany, take it from here.
Yeah, if you guys want to have some closing arguments, and then I don't know if we want to get to this question we have as well. Up to you, but yeah, we're gonna have to shut this down in a few minutes.
I think we fleshed out as much as we probably. If you want to do a closing, that's fine with me, sir.
I'll just say that fascism subverts the will of the people for the will of a minority, and that true democratization of a state would protect the individual liberties of the voting class to maintain individual sovereignty. And that's why I'm a libertarian socialist, and that's why you shouldn't be fascist, because you don't want someone to come and tell you how to live your life.
All I'll close with is that every democratic process that I've seen thus far is completely and totally and easily subverted, and you end up with exactly the same thing over and over and over again, which is a proletariat revolution, which leads to communism. That's what I see time and time again, or some type of monarchy or autocracy, except at that point, it's unrestrained.
Great, thank you. All right, so yeah, maybe we'll just get to like 1 or 2 questions, and then we're gonna shut this down. So this is for Lewis. As a libertarian who believes in private property, does he support socializing institutions such as healthcare, education, housing, and food services?
So yeah, I think that, like, if we look at, I'm very much in favor of private property, actually, and I think that's what led us to socialism. Because if you look at the conception of private property, it means that an individual owns whatever they produce, and and if you understand like the foundations of private property, for example, in let's say the liberal arguments that were put forward by John Locke, what makes private property yours is that you've mixed your labor into it, that you've combined a part of you with an object in reality, and that forms a product, something that you've actually that is yours by definition, right? Take something in the world and you make it yours by doing work to it. Now, the issue is when someone's employed, they are rented, right? Like someone owns whatever they produce, and that subverts private property. And I want to maintain private property, so which is why I went socialist. But there are aspects of the economy I think that an individual should be maintained publicly to enable a fair and open market. So if we won't have a fair and open market if people are coerced into the market and can be subject to unfair trades. So in the words of Aristotle, the government is there to maintain a fair trade. And to maintain a fair trade, we need to remove negative coercive forces upon individuals that prevent them going freely into the market. So being poorly educated, coming from lower class backgrounds, being unable to access medicine can put an individual into such a scenario as they will go down on bended knee and do whatever it takes to survive, even when it's not in their best interests. And so the government has to step in and maintain a certain standard of living to maintain a free and open economy.
Okay, and then we have what diet would be optimal?
Diet would be optimal would be like a healthy, balanced plant-based diet. So you can have like a whole food plant-based diet. It's really good. It's been shown to reduce cholesterol levels, even prevent or some argue even reverse heart disease, which is pretty substantial. And certainly one that is free from high levels of saturated fat, cholesterol, and one that's ethical, one that doesn't destroy habitats, one that doesn't kill billions of sentient beings, and one that doesn't produce things like the coronavirus or H5N1, HIV, polio, tuberculosis, all of those things, all of those good stuff. So yeah,
Produced HIV.
what? Like the bushmeat trade, people eating meat.
Okay, so a question for Andrew. Where did Andrew get his beliefs? What is his background in public policy and government? What books does he recommend, and who is his inspiration?
So I study all forms of history that I can possibly get my hands on. Um, I was a gunsmith for many, many years, and one of the preconceptions that I walked into with that job was that it would be easy. It was hard. One of the things that made me so great at it and made me a master at it was comparing the different guns that different people use with the different cultures that they came from and the different civilizations and the application of those weapons. It gives you a far better insight into what their purpose was. And you couldn't really help but follow suit with the rest of the history at that. So let's see, particularly specific books, I would read How Democracy Dies by Hopper. I think I'm getting the title right. Start with that.
Okay, so last question, then we're going to shut this down. If Andrew is arguing for a natural hierarchy, what makes the current democratic political balance not a natural hierarchy? How is this not the same arbitrary line of natural?
I suppose in a way it would be. The difference there is that other hierarchies are going to start opposing this hierarchy that's here, and you're going to end up with something much more totalitarian than you could ever imagine. You're going to have some form of autocracy, whether you like it or not at this point, at least in the United States. We might as well pick the one that we want.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I want to thank you guys both for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to set this up again, you guys had a lot to say to each other. So I mean, we can always do another topic another time.
Democracy, the God That Failed by Hoppe.
Okay.
Thank you for having on, and thank you for hosting. Really appreciate it. And just to even add on to what was said last about natural hierarchies, I think Hegel said it best. When he said, "Man by nature is not what he should be." And I think that's
that's subjective and can mean anything. So
it's not subjective because ethics is objective. So
morals are more objective than ethics are, and we can debate on that sometime if you want to.
Yeah,
well, actually, the moral ethic distinction was made by Hegel in the first place, so I'd absolutely debate that. So anyway, thank you very much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. If you guys want to subscribe, we host debates every week. We have another one on Sunday. Our host Todd is going to be debating globalism versus nationalism and patriotism, and that is at 9 p.m. Eastern. But thank you guys both for coming on, and
good luck, Todd.
We're gonna shut it down.
Thank you.
Right. How do I leave? Oh my god, there we go. Okay. So that was something. What did you just think? I think that, like, I don't know, that was some libertarian socialism may allow for the exploitation of animals. This is the issue. I would say that an individual, like, we need the education of the population to reject the exploitation of animals. I don't believe in moral progression through forced hierarchization. I don't think it's possible. And you actually revert to a form of fascism. Yeah, I think the guy's a bit of an idiot, if I'm honest. Yeah. Gave you lung cancer. Absolutely. I could breathe the smoke through the mic, man. Jesus, you can go through them. Like, absolute chain smoker. I hope he's okay. Like, really, in the grand scheme of things, he's definitely not gonna be if he keeps going that way. Yeah, I don't think the guy had a train of logic. I think that implies too much. Like, it was like immigrants, bad, democracy, bad, fascism, good. That's all I got, really, from most of his arguments. Like, the subversion of democracy is a bad thing, and why he hates democracy. And he's like, oh, right, so I want to subvert democracy. Like, it's like, wait, what? Yeah, and have some people living in China talk about China. Let's hope I don't get fucking executed. Nature good. Yeah, absolutely. It was just nature good. And it's like, nature's not good, man. Nature sucks. Like, nature sucks royally. I need an emote saying dumb. BP, where do you get your information on China? Seriously, I think that I think a lot of it's public, man. So, for example, the social credit system in China, it's kind of like the trials of that were made public. A lot of the information that I have about China is publicly available in relation to China. So, yeah. I think I should have focused on the human nature aspect of the argument. I wanted to. It's all fascists do that. And that's why I said, like, well, what's this definition of human nature? And they just go history. And then that's where you get, like, Paulo Vernal's natural historical diagrams, where it's like, history doesn't prove nature. And he's just like, well, you're being an idiot. And I was just like, look, even if we accept nature, it doesn't prove what you're arguing for. It's just kind of like, it's a self-defeating argument. Like, if human nature is closer to a bonobo and they're democratic, then, like, nature argues that we should be democratic, like, so that's kind of the argument. That's kind of the way I went down with that one. Maybe next time I'll go what I think is the much more persuasive argument, which is natural historical diagrams. Do those people not realize that they would be allowed to express? I know. They don't understand that they would actually be advocating for their own oppression. I don't see how they don't see that. Like, it's like, oh, right, well, the government are taking too many controls and are trying to deplatform, like, conservatives. And it's like, right, you know that the government can outright ban political opposition in fascism, right? Like, it's just like, do it and you die. But this government's bad because they'll kick you off Twitter. It's like Twitter kicked me off. The government's evil. It's like, oh. How do you think the guy would have answered name the trait? Probably just being human, I think. Power, maybe, I don't know. Oh, no, those issues that he was having under democracy were literally, absolutely could have been used as a way to describe fascism. That was the weirdest thing ever. Like, it was just like, he was like, does fascism do all this? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what fascism does. And then like, what are natural historical diagrams? Natural historical diagrams is essentially what Paulo Vernal promotes as the explanation of human nature given by most individuals. So when you say that it's natural, what you really do is a cultural analysis between two cultures and point out similarities. And you say that those similarities justify a notion of human nature when there's nothing in terms of, let's say, the nature of, like, the actual evolutionary biological, like, mechanism that we see that shows that it is natural human behavior. And we can show not only counterexamples, but all we're doing really is comparing, usually philosophically, similar societies and saying it's an aspect of nature, when in reality it can be explained through tradition and multiple other explanations anyway. I don't know if I believe that the guy got through a biology degree. I don't think that, like, I don't think that he's, like, for example, like, it's very possible that he did. Like, you can be an idiot and get a degree. And, like, at the end of the day, like, he's kind of running with the social, like, hierarchical biological take, isn't he? Which is, like, really just, it's bad biology, but it's biology. So was the guy basically saying that the average individuals in our society are not competent enough to have democracy, so it's better to default to authoritarianism? Pretty much. But then he was kind of saying that like they can be subverted and bribed, and so like authoritarianism will happen anyway. That's kind of his main argument. I think it's just kind of dumb. It's like, oh, like there's issues with democracy. It's like, yes there is. We should fix them. And he's like, no, we should get rid of democracy. We're going to kill the patient to get rid of the infection. You know, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm going to cut the stream off in about 2 minutes, guys. So if you do have a question, drop it into chat. And thank you very much, Groven. I really appreciate it. So yeah, if you have a question, do drop it into chat, and I'll do my best to answer it. So actually, before that pops up, I think, is the alert box on? Oop. Off point is anyone? Well, the mutually assured destruction K with nuclear weapons. It's kind of like, as soon as they're invented, it's an arms race in terms of power between nations. The issue is that nuclear weapons would even be or being perpetuated by national, by national identity and antagonism. And so really what we're seeing is it's not like the nuclear weapons are just the next stage of an arms race. The issue is why we're entering into arms races in the first place ideologically. To be fair to the fascist, he didn't know many things, but he did know they have the datas. Yeah, exactly. It's like they have the datas. I love that one. That was my favorite argument. Like, there are 50 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Like, how do you know that? The census. I'm like, how does the census collect data on people who don't fill in census? And he's like, they have the data. That was the best. I'm not an objectivist in the sense of Randian objectivism, if you mean that. I am a ethical objectivist and a Hegelian. I think Rand was like half right. She understood that the individual should be rational, and if the individual is rational and self-interested, it leads to a form of objective ethics. She just misunderstood how self-development occurred and what the self is. So yeah. Yeah, it was like, it was weird that he pivoted from China communist to the people there loving it. It's like, that was the best. It's like, like the communists in China are bad. And then it's like, as soon as I start saying like the communists in China are bad, he's like, the people in China love China. Don't you talk about China like that. Oh, what a guy. What a guy. Right, guys. Also, just to let you know, in terms of like the whole Wagyu beef thing, yeah, still kill animals, still perpetuate suffering unnecessarily, just eat plants. So yeah. But I'm going to go off now, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed this discussion. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe. Check out the your chance to win my course, An Introduction to Western Philosophy, below. And as always, actually, thank you to Ethan, Brick, Jeremy, and Ben for supporting this stream. Thank you very much. You can also help by checking out Patreon. Patreon. So yeah, thank you very much, and thank you everyone who's watched. I hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, try to gain some perspective.